I think.
Any opposed? All right. In the municipal regulation, municipal operations, do you want to make a motion and start?
I would like to make a motion that we open our section of the public hearing. All in favor? Aye. Right, we have a quorum. I would also like to make a motion that we look at take Article 4, 6, and 7 out of order. That way there, our group can deal with that, and then you can move on. You want to make a motion?
Okay, so there's a motion to take them out of order. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay. All opposed? All right, so let's start with number 4. Number 4 is the Stoughton Public Safety Fiber Optic Network. Okay, welcome.
Hello, my name is Ryan McGee. I'm the IT director for the town and the schools. Article 4, a brief summary, is we're looking to run fiber optic cables from our police station to 2 high points, which are the water towers. And to do that, it's building the infrastructure for communication for public safety. We have police equipment that's going to get mounted on the towers, and the fiber optics will allow them to do so. And also it will give us room to grow in the future for future communications as well.
Okay.
I can share the breakdown if that's helpful.
It's also helpful to understand that there are currently dead spots in the town where the only way the police are able to communicate is via phone cards from Verizon, frankly. And there is an expense to that. In the long run, that expense would go away once the system is up and fully operational.
Okay, and you have a breakdown?
Yes. We're currently using existing vendors. They're on state bid contract pricing. One of our vendors is Comtrack. They actually physically run our fiber. So the estimate, the current quote we have is approximately $40,000, so $39,328. And then we have some hardware that's required, which is approximately $3,400. So that totals about 43,000. I'm rounding a little. And then we have installation costs for $7,000. And what that will do is that will allow us just to make sure the configurations are properly done.
Okay, any questions from anybody? Okay.
Okay.
Mr.
With
Hanson.
the fiber optic going to be running on the telephone poles, is there any lease fees or any fees attached to putting them on the poles?
I do not believe there's any fees. We do have a fee for the installation of the cables, but I don't know of any recurring fees.
And who will be maintaining these cables when they're on the pole? If there's somebody smacks into a pole and takes the fiber optic cable down, whose responsibility?
We would be
to repair that?
responsible to replace that segment of cable. They do have, I believe, insurance kind of plans, but I don't believe that's worth it.
If we have a pole that goes down and we know the culprit, so for example, in the center of town, we frequently lose poles to semis who can't make the turns. Our insurance company goes after the insurance company of whoever the culprit is. That's been our standard practice. If they're unable to find that person, then we actually have insurance that replaces the pole and the equipment on the pole.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Brown?
The question I have will be basically for several. You said run fiber optic cables to the police station currently?
Correct.
Is there going to be another cost associated with an additional building? Or how, for example, is there going to be more money needed if this building is potentially moved in the future?
It would be an additional cost to a separate location. This building, though, however, if it remains part of the town, we would definitely be connected to the fiber backbone. So it would be put to use as well, as long as we...
So I understand you'll be able to recycle this equipment, but you don't know what the potential, like, for example, I don't know if anyone has any idea where this potential new building will go, and is it going to be something that you can take into consideration now, what the potential costs are going to be in the future? For example, I'm always hearing about now and-
That cost would actually be part of the proposal for the new public safety facility, which is going to become public within the next month. It is still not currently public. It will be presented soon to the Board of Selectmen with the intent of having it on the Springtown meeting. But that particular piece that will be essential to the system will actually be part of the cost, and it's already been figured into the proposed new facility.
Mr. Mitchell?
Now, is this the same locations we're using now?
I'm sorry, could you?
The water towers, is it this, we're putting fiber optics up, but we have antennas there already?
Yes.
We
that's
have no
correct.
dead spots in the town whatsoever?
There are dead spots now. They are the locations that we currently use for fire, but the police equipment is not currently located there. The police-
Because I know when I was on the zoning board, some of the applicants allowed, part of it was that we could put something on their towers if need be for the town, so I'm just gonna throw that out for you. In case you get dead spots, maybe you can dig up some of these decisions in the right place.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I can say, Steve, in answer to your question is wherever the zoning board has gotten that particular perk for the town, we have in fact followed through and installed the fiber optic equipment on every private cell tower that the zoning board has identified as being eligible for that. But there still are certain dead spots.
Okay, Mr. Ansobino?
Yeah, in the article, and it talks about tying into the police station and so forth as part of that central. And I know this kind of runs into the next article you're going to hear, which is Article 6, but it talks about putting this in so it ties into this central dispatch that's going to be at the police station, which was approved 2 years ago. I don't know where that really stands, and I know we have that coming up in Article 6, but that's the only thing that gives me some concern here is where do we stand with that addition of the central dispatch at the police station? Has any work been done on that to
Yeah.
date?
Let's wait until we get to Article 6 for that one, and then we'll...
This says it's going to tie into it.
I know,
Madam.
but I know...
Well, if it's going to tie into it, I'd like to know where we are with it now.
I think, John, when it says it ties into it, it means that this will be, whenever central dispatch goes in, this will be a central piece. It's an essential piece to the centralized dispatch, no matter where it goes.
All right, well, my concern being that if that's the case, and this wouldn't be done until the central dispatch goes in, it gives me a big concern considering what was done 2 years ago and what was approved, and that more than what was originally approved to do that central dispatch, we're going to be talking about in the next article. And if you add this on top of it, it's quite a jump from what was approved 2 years ago to do a job that we all were in favor of doing at the time, and now all of a sudden we're going to be going quite a bit over that.
I understand that, but please understand that relative to this fiber optic system, there is in fact a positive side to the fact that it improves communications between officers who are on the street in virtual time. Regardless of whether it ties into the dispatch center or not, it does improve communication on the ground.
So this would go in regardless of the central dispatch,
It would be essential, yes,
without
even without the central
right.
dispatch.
Thank you.
So if Article 6 dies, or 5, I guess it is, or 6, whatever one it was, we would still want this, yes.
it. All right, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Murphy?
I'm going to start off with a couple of questions. First one is, a couple of years ago, it was proposed to do cable, same idea, cable throughout the town, for town buildings. How is this different than that?
There is a fiber optic system that was installed free of charge as part of the franchise agreement the Board of Selectmen granted to the provider. That fiber optic system connects all of the town buildings. At that time, for whatever reason, we did not choose to connect the 2 water towers that are under question here. But there is, in fact, a fiber optic system that connects every building. It's part of Ryan's responsibility. It's there. It ties into his central core, and it connects all town buildings by virtue of a vote of a previous Board of Selectmen.
But that's now maintained through Verizon, correct?
No, it's independent.
So who's actually maintaining those cables?
We are maintaining the cables.
When you
They're low maintenance. They come into the buildings, and that's our responsibility.
Once they come into the building, correct?
Correct.
But outside the building, who maintains that part of the cable?
I believe we do.
Yeah, it's actually maintained by the same people who maintain our streetlights. So, for example, we had a pole go down not too long ago that actually cut off police department communications. The company that does our maintenance on our streetlights came out and repaired the problem. That's how it's set up right now.
So where does that fall into the budget?
That is, for the most part, in that particular case, that would come through an insurance recovery account, which Bill Rowe can explain better than I can. But the actual budget part for the bulk of that activity is found in Public Works, because they have the contract for the streetlights.
So that is budgeted through Town Works, DPW department, they have to...
Primarily, yes.
And they have to chase the money, or the town chases the money after the fact.
Yeah, typically, we don't chase the money. Typically, our insurance company is very good
But
at
I mean,
chasing that money.
But there's something in the DPW account, in their budget, to maintain lights in this fiber optic
There
cable.
is, and there has been all along.
Okay. I recall the last time that article, very similar article, it got voted down before town meeting. And that's why I'm kind of concerned that here, this is a very similar article. I mean, and it's, now you're telling me that article that got voted down at town meeting went through the selectmen without going through the town meeting.
You may think I'm telling you that, but I wasn't here, so I'm not telling you that. I can tell you that in the franchise agreement, as has been standard for most towns in the Commonwealth, towns have required a fiber optic system to be installed between their buildings. And in the 2 other Massachusetts communities where I've worked, that was done as part of the franchise agreement at no cost to the taxpayers.
So if it's at no cost to the taxpayers, then why are we spending $40,000 for this part of it?
Because again, we did not, for whatever reason at that time, think to hook up these 2 water towers for police communication purposes. That you would have to ask a prior Board of Selectmen. It probably was not on the horizon. It may have not been a priority for the chief. I can't answer that question.
But if you have, okay, if you have this, it's a contract, that contract must be coming up at some point, very well could be part of the next contract.
You mean the next franchise agreement?
Correct.
I would have to check and see when the next franchise agreement is. Typically, the Public Utilities Commission at the state level, usually you do that in your first contract. You don't do it in subsequent contracts. So it's usually a case of you get one bite at the apple, and if you don't do it all then you're in the same boat we are now.
So poor planning on our part is basically what you're saying.
I can't say, again, I wasn't here.
Okay.
Wait a minute, Mr. Rock?
Oh, I'm all set.
You're all set? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, wait a minute. Anybody else from municipal regulations? Oh, you're from, go ahead, yep. Dave Lurie.
Dave Lurie, Precinct 6. I thought I heard in the opening, there was something about the water towers already having connections for the fire department?
Yes.
And we're adding a new set of fibers just for the police?
It's not currently fiber.
So it's currently copper?
I believe so, yes. It's not fiber.
So is
I can say that when this is installed, fire will be using fiber optic also.
Right,
This
so
is
you know
for-
where I'm going, right?
this is for
It's
both.
Why would you
Correct.
have two
Correct.
different circuits?
We would no longer have 2 different services. The copper service would be eliminated,
So
and it would be
what's
fiber
wrong with the
optic.
copper in being able to use copper instead of fiber if the copper's already there?
I don't believe it's compatible with the newest equipment. Because we're working towards IP-based equipment, so it uses the new technology.
IP technology does work on copper, though, right? You can get IP over copper, correct? Yeah, so it's possible that you could have used copper? So why did you explore whether or not there'd be enough capacity to run police and fire over the existing copper? Is that a yes, you have considered that, or?
I did not explore that option.
Okay, so that would save us the entire article if there was enough capacity on the existing copper. Okay. The other question I have is there was mention of the Verizon Air Cards in terms of phasing those out if we had enough coverage with the new system. My question is that it seems to me like a very critical safety thing that we're trying to get enough communication that when downtime happens, and it always does, what do they do? What do our safety officials do at that point? What do they do for backup? Is there enough redundancy built into the design of this that if there was a cut, that the network would be redundant?
There is redundancy in place, even beyond our network. I believe they can patch into, I don't know the specific names of it, but I believe there's emergency channels or so forth that can be used.
So no matter where there's a cut, you'd still be up. You wouldn't be down.
Yes.
And that's only with the new design? Or is that only with the old design, or is that
I
either?
believe that's both designs.
Both designs. Okay, so the question then is that bringing police onto the same capabilities of fire is really the minimum requirement, is what I'm hearing. Well, that's all I have to add.
Okay. Is there anybody here from Intergovernmental? Okay, do you have any questions down there? Okay. Is there anybody from the public who has a question? Okay, Ms. Walsh.
Cynthia Walsh, 1096 Park Street. I'm a town meeting rep from Precinct 2. I know this is called a public hearing, but I'm having a hard time hearing, and I'm part of the public. I didn't hear the total cost. It seemed to differ from what's printed.
It does in fact differ from what is printed, but these are the funds that we are short.
So how much are we going to be voting at town meeting?
We are asking for 40,000. The total cost, I believe, Ryan said, is roughly 47 and change.
So the 40 becomes 47.
We are asking town meeting for 40 because we have 7 in hand.
Oh, I see. Okay. Thank you.
Ms. D'Antomino?
Just to follow up on the previous question to you. If there is a system in place now at the towers, but if I understand correctly, that's not connected to the police right now.
That's correct.
So if you wanted to keep the copper system, you'd still have to run copper wire to tie into the system, correct?
Very possible.
But if you ran the fiber to the two towers, if you ran the fiber optic to the two towers, the fiber would be able to jump on that system because of the infrastructure already in place.
Yes, we would have to.
So if you had to run copper, you'd still be incurring a cost to run the copper from the two towers back to the police station.
I'm not 100% sure where the copper leads. We would have to explore that further.
But well, maybe not to the police station, but you'd have to run it from the towers to...
From potentially
from somewhere to tie back into the station.
From potentially the towers.
So you wouldn't be cutting out the whole requirement. I told you it was no good.
We would have to.
The main point being that even if you were to go with copper as opposed to the fiber, there would still be a cost incurred by the town to run something to tie back in.
We would have to reconfigure. I don't know what the cost would be. We would have to see what's existing and where it ties in. and if so, we would have to route it. So there would be a cost, but it might be slight. I honestly don't know the condition of that copper cable and its capacity. We would have to explore that
But
further.
there would still be work required.
I'm sorry?
If the wish was to go with the copper instead, there would still be a cost involved. It's
Yes,
not
there
that
would.
the system is in place that could be used now.
There would be a cost, yes, because you would have to reconfigure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ed, did you have a question?
If I could, Madam Chair, I didn't realize the police chief had come in, because I've been facing you rather than the back of the building. He can answer some, or he can address some concerns and questions that folks had regarding dead spots and redundancy. And so I've asked him to come up and try to enlighten you on those issues.
Okay. Chief, go ahead.
Thank you. As far as dead spots, we have areas off of West Street, down near Ash Street. These areas are inaccessible by police radios. Our police portable radios are rendered inefficient, inoperative. We do have some redundancy. The redundancy comes in the form of switching channels and going onto the Boston Area Police Emergency Radio Network. That is not what it's meant to do. It's not meant to patch and plug holes in a net, a web net of inefficient radio operability. Our cruisers have a difficult time. This is not something that is conducive to proper policing. If we're looking for someone and we have to get out on our portables, it's a safety issue. So I can't talk about the technology side of it. I have no clue about copper versus fiber optic. All I know is that when it comes to communication, if we can't speak and they can't hear us at dispatch, you folks are the ones that would feel the pinch as well as us.
Ed, you had a question? Go ahead.
The article we voted on at town meeting was supposed to be for the new dispatch. It was supposed to put in all those microwave towers and systems and all that. Did any of that ever get done, the microwave piece? Because that was supposed to solve all the dead spots and all the other stuff.
As John indicated earlier, you're actually talking about a different article. And there has been some things done on that, but very little. Because when we realized that we did not have sufficient funds, we did not go forward. We decided to come back to town meeting for additional money. So the money that was appropriated for that article, which I believe was roughly $235K, give or take, is still, for the most part, sitting there waiting to be spent.
Okay, now this new fiber optic thing, whatever it is, how is that different than if we vote for the new dispatch and do all the microwaves and everything else? Is it separate, or is it part of the same, or is this a backup, or that sort of thing?
It is a separate system, and we're trying to connect all the locations in the town and the water towers to our backbone infrastructure so that we have redundancy, so that we have capacity to build communications. We called it a public safety project because, again, we're hoping to bring fire online, police, maybe even someday the DPW. So we want to make sure we move in the right direction. Copper, cable, I can explore it further.
I don't care about that.
But I'm just concerned about reliability. And
Well, I'm worried about if we don't do the other article, and we wait 3 years for the fire station to be built, the new public safety building, will this help the dead spots and work out in the interim until we get the whole new system figured out?
yes, if we move forward with this will build the infrastructure. And then I believe the police department, I believe they're already in the works from a prior warrant article to move some existing equipment, the repeaters. They're going to move those onto the towers, and they're going to push that through the fiber channels.
And then this new system, how much of this would be transferable to the new public safety building if and when we build it?
The two water towers at this point will always be online to our fiber backbone.
So what do we lose out of the 40 grand? What gets put into the building, the police department or
I
wherever?
guess it depends on what we use the police station for, because if we keep that a municipal building, you won't lose anything, because if that will remain connected to our fiber infrastructure. So if we were to, say, sell the police station or somebody else would use it, then it would just be disconnected, then you would lose that segment.
And then to do, say we build a public safety building somewhere,
Mhm.
what do you need to do to move that piece to the new building for the system? Is that like another 10 grand or whatever the number might? something
Yes,
to that effect?
you would hook up the new building wherever the new building was, as part of the building process, I believe.
That'd be built
It would
in.
be included, hooking that up to our infrastructure.
Thank you.
Okay, Joe, and then we'll have one more question. Okay, so Peter, this will be the last question, and then we'll move on.
Thank you. First off, I wanted to know, Chief, if this was essential, and you answered my question. It goes with little doubt, you removed all doubt when you said there's a question of safety for your officers and the citizens. So I also was a little worried about the cost of this building, about Posette, but because this is something that is going to directly affect whether or not it's not done, it's going to be an issue. I think that I would be very supportive of this, never mind what the cost will be down the road or whatever. And I appreciate, and I know I'm rambling for a minute, but I want to say, based on the fact that it was essential provided to whether it was yes, could be better supporting our equipment or communication, or it's a needed, and where it's needed, I do want to let you know that I support you on that. Thank you. I'm sorry. Yeah.
What type of line are they running?
Okay, let's move on to number 6.
Any questions? Are we voting on all these at one time?
Oh, thank you. I think what we'll do is we'll go through all the public hearings, and then we'll vote, or we'll decide whether we want to vote tonight or another night.
We're doing number 6.
Yeah, we're going to do 6. So that,
Well, I have to start off with 5 because 5 is relevant. And that is because 5 is relevant. When we realized we didn't have sufficient funds to do the central dispatch, we were informed by bond counsel that we could tap these articles for this money. In consulting with the Board of Selectmen said, no, for the sake of transparency, let's rescind the old articles and come in with a new article that incorporates that amount of money in it. So that's why you see number 5 to rescind certain things and number 6 to add on. In terms of the actual cost of the central dispatch, it's as simple as the initial estimate was in fact substantially under what the real cost is going to be. I will leave it to Chief Shastany to explain how that estimate came up. I can tell you how the new estimate came up. The original estimate came from the 2 chiefs. The estimate, and they were doing it without the benefit of assistance from an architect and without the benefit of the assistance of a facilities manager, which we now have. Shortly after Paul got here and took a look at this project, he came to me and said, there's no way you're getting it done for the money you have appropriated. And in reference to what you said, that's when we stopped, because we weren't going to start spending money if we couldn't finish. And I think it demonstrates part of the reason why we needed someone like Paul, and we needed an in-house architect, because, to a certain extent, we're flying by the seat of our pants. So once we took a look at this, and Paul worked with an architect who came in and took a look at it, these are the costs that we had. And it ended up, as you can see, being the amount we asked for, which is 250, 51 of which is from the previous article, number 5. This completes it. In anticipation of your question, because this came up before the Board of Selectmen, of the total we would now spend, which would be 250 and 235 roughly, or 485,000, how much of it could not be moved? And the answer to that question is approximately $165,000 of it would be an investment in that building that remains in that building and cannot be physically moved. So, for example, the electrical work alone to do this project is $56,000. And that's estimated. So that's where we stand. Paul is here to answer any questions. Chief Chastity is here to answer any questions.
Okay, anybody have a question? Okay, Mr. Anspino.
Along with the equipment, when they were going to central dispatch, that also included personnel being hired to do the central dispatch. Has anything been done with the personnel, or is that been on hold as well?
No, in anticipation of this going forward, we begin the training. The training has been going on. Police dispatchers have been trained to be able to do medical and fire dispatchers have begun to be trained in order to do police, because there's 3 distinct training packages out there, and there's certain certifications involved in all 3 of them. So that has been ongoing and paid for by Chief Chastity out of his budget.
And they're just still operating out of each?
They're still operating individually,
In each
yes.
dispatch.
That is correct.
Mr. Murphy.
So correct me if I'm wrong. You're saying Article 5 is going to be rescinded for the 50-something thousand, and then you're going to be asking for 250, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. When I look at Article 5, I know it's because you introduced that as part of the discussion. I see a breakdown of that. It says you're going to do mechanical room, 10,000, the police station maintenance, 25, the police station carpet, 16,000. And seeing those numbers, we could see where the money was going. When you ask for 250,000, you want the town to write you a blank check for 250,000 with very little, if no explanation of where it's going. And at a public hearing, you don't have anything for us. Now, if you come before town meeting, I'll be the first one to stand up and vote against this with the information that I don't have, because you're asking for a lot of money with no explanation, no detail. And again, that's what we fall into issues with these articles. People ask for money, and we don't know where it's going for. You have money sitting on the table for other articles, for other repairs that hasn't been spent yet. And it just becomes one big pot, and we have no idea where this money's going. Do you have anything readily available to explain where the 250,000 is going to go towards?
We have something readily available that explains where the full 485,000 was done.
You do?
Yes.
And when will we see that?
If you want us to make copies and distribute it tonight, we are.
I would like that, because if our group is going to vote on that tonight, personally, I would push for a negative vote against this if I don't have anything in front of me.
Yeah, go ahead and do it.
What I would like to do is, once we have a chance to review this, have the opportunity to come back and ask a few more questions before the evening's over. Thank you.
Yeah, we can do that. Does anybody else have any questions on
I
this
think you meant
article?
tonight.
Ed?
In relation to this amount of money, are you certain that this is enough? Because the original was 2-some, we missed by 100%. Now, we ain't gonna come back here, I need another 50 next year or whatever. How certain are you that this is enough for this particular
I
project?
can tell you that this figure has been vetted with a qualified facilities manager and an architect who specializes in public safety. And we are confident that it would, in fact, take care of the job.
Okay, and then in the bigger scheme of things, in terms of the new public safety building, what are the plans currently thinking about what we can do with the old police station and the old fire station?
Those are issues that the Board of Selectmen will have to wrestle with when the new building is built. To really determine that at this point in time would be premature.
So we don't know.
I can tell you, and it's been public for some time, that in terms of the old South Coast Rail project, the Board of Selectmen has publicly presented a proposal to the DOT to build a joint parking facility at the site of the current police station. That's been in the public domain now for nearly 2 years. That
Who would
that
own
offer
that?
has not been taken off the table.
Who would own that, the town or the T?
It would be jointly built by the two, the building would be jointly built by the two, and the land would be retained by the town of Stoughton. It would be a long-term lease, at least that's the way it was proposed 2 years ago.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Joe?
I'm just curious, how did you come up with these estimates? You pulled these off the CAD program or?
Again, Paul is a certified builder, so he did some of them. Most of them were put together, again, by an architect from a firm called Dunham and Sweeney, which is a firm that specializes in public safety facilities.
No, that's the actual architect's fee that was agreed upon for the project, and we probably paid him, I believe, $7,500, $8,000 already for his services. That is what it is. That number is the number. Yes. Yes.
Okay, Mr. Rock?
Yeah, what's the potential timeline for a new building? And if it's not too far in the horizon, why not just wait?
The potential timeline for a new building will frankly depend upon the voters. We intend to go to a spring town meeting. We intend to bring it to a spring town meeting, if in fact it's approved by the voters, and a debt exclusion is approved, which will be an awful big thing to get approved, but I can tell you, we don't have the funds to build it within 2.5. If it's approved, then the building could be built within 18 months.
Well, wouldn't it make sense to wait, since there's a lot of sunk costs that would be...
That would be a question really for Chief Shastany, quite frankly.
Well, I don't know. It just would make sense to wait to vote on this until after a vote's taken on a new building.
I have a question.
I guess I can say in regard to that, first, if you don't build a new building, you're committed to a central dispatch.
But you're going to waste, you said 180, probably $200,000.
Roughly $165K.
Yeah, so...
And that does include the $36,000 architect's fee.
So I don't think we should waste that money.
Okay, I have a question for you. Let's say we give you the money. Let's pretend for a minute that we give you the money. How long is it going to take to get this done?
The actual work, actual construction shouldn't take longer than 6 to 8 weeks.
6 to 8 weeks, okay.
Starting when? No, seriously, because I think John raises a good point.
Yeah, we would intend to build it to bid it as soon as we could after town meeting. We have to wait 5 days, as you know. We would then, the architect, it's relatively simple spec because a lot of it is equipment. And then we would bid it as soon as we could. So I would expect that if it passed at town meeting, you would see construction mobilizing probably sometime around the first of the year at the latest.
But it would be done before the spring town meeting? Yes. If this were approved, it would be done months ahead of it?
Correct.
All right.
Okay, Mr. Malley?
So if, say in Springtown meeting, we approve the new fire station, police station, and then what's the time frame for that to actually, you have to go to the vote and you have to get an override, when would that be, the year after? How's this process, like, what's the time, so if we say yes at town meeting, is this like another 3-year process just to get the money? And then another 3-year process to get it built, or is this something that will be done?
The building,
know,
the proposed new police and fire facility can be built in as little as 18 months. It's going on a site that has no building on it. So there's no demolition that needs to be taken place.
All right, so they approve it at town meeting, but then we still have to do a debt exclusion.
Correct.
Somehow. And that has to go to the voters, I'm assuming.
Correct.
And would that, the earliest be that April
It would be
following?
my recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, since the school building committee is going to ask the Board of Selectmen to schedule a debt exclusion election for early June, that this be put on the same ballot, meaning the public safety facility.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else?
Yeah, what-
Okay, anybody from
Just a,
operations? Anybody from intergovernmental? Oh, you got a question?
Just
Okay.
a small question.
All right.
There's vehicle laptops and mounting hardware. How many units are you getting for that?
So, I'm sorry, I was just about to make a correction. That vehicle laptops 68,279 that's been removed, and that should be replaced where radios are for 68,571. So the same numbers, but the actual laptops in the vehicles have been removed.
So
But if you see-
the
if-
dollars are going to radios and you're removing laptops and?
Correct.
Yes, we are not asking to do laptops at this time. As I indicated to the Board of Selectmen when we presented the article, that piece of this is premature, and these are laptops for fire vehicles, which currently do not have laptops in them. All the police vehicles do in fact have them, but that will be an issue that will be on the Springtown meeting, because according to the acting fire chief, the laptops are not an essential part of dispatch. They're an essential piece of firefighting equipment to give them the most current information that's in the data system.
Okay, so I understand that. So on the radios, you're saying that there's $68,000 worth of radios at this point? Is that my understanding? Because it sounds like either very sophisticated radios or you're getting a whole lot of them. I don't know, just that's what it appears to me. If you're moving the dollars to radios, what kind of radios are we talking about here? I don't.
Those are radios located at the 3 new dispatch position consoles.
So these are consoles that live in the office? These are like office console things, these pretty sophisticated system? It's not like a radio in a car where somebody pushes a button and makes a call. We're talking about something else, I'm assuming.
Something much more elaborate than that.
I'm assuming it's much more, yeah, that's a...
He is in fact the expert on that.
As far as the consoles, those are base stations with the capacity to reach out to different cities and towns within the mutual aid network that the fire department uses. They would have to be installed in the police station. There are 3 console stations, 3 separate stations. Picture the Star Trek with it wrapping around each person. We will have 2 dispatchers and 1/3 vacant in the event that there's an issue, someone can jump in. That's the purpose of that. And if I can just back up a little bit, when the town manager and I had conversations about moving the dispatch forward and we ran into a stumbling block, one of the things that we did is to initiate the integration of the computers into the fire stations. We sat down with the tech folks and with Paul and the other folks, and what our intention was since we have the dispatchers cross-trained, get everyone in front of one of those machines, in front of the computers. They're in different locations, but start using the system and get familiar with it so that we don't have training break-in issues where when we all migrate to one location, we've just left them in the dark. So we have started that. The intention is to get this going so that they can use the system. We have a license from IMC, which is the system of software that the fire department is going to use, and it's a steep learning curve. So we've started that. We've started the integration. It's just moving people into the station that we're looking at now in that environment. That's hopefully enough information to kind of give you a snapshot of where we're trying to move this.
Okay, Mr. Ansmani, you had one more question?
Yeah, one quick thing with the Article 5, the 3 that are being rescinded, and then that's expected to be used in Article 6, and you can see that in the recommendation. Is this unissued borrowing, was that the total amount for those articles and that work was never done, or is this what's actually left over?
That is the total amount for those articles. It was work to be done that we chose not to do when we decided to go to centralized dispatch. And then, like I said, in consulting with the Board of Selectmen, their recommendation was, look, even though bond counsels told us we can use those articles, let's be transparent. Let's go back to town meeting. Let's have them rescind those articles. And yet still use that money as part of the new article. So that's what we chose to do.
So we can assume that they won't be coming back looking for this money to do the work later?
Yes, you can assume that. Because this work will be done now as part of that article.
This is going to be wrapped into this article?
Correct.
Well, I don't know how transparent that is. If you're doing the work anyways, why are you rescinding it? You could have asked for $200,000 instead if you're going to be doing the work, but that's beside the point. If the work's being done, I mean, I look at these and they're 5 years, 3 years, and 2 years old, and if the work hasn't been done, did it really need to be done? Because if it hasn't been done in that amount of time.
Okay, Mr. DeFelice, I know you've been patiently waiting.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. I mean, first of all, I try to approach a lot of these things with common sense. And common sense tells me that probably shouldn't be putting this in a building that you're going to demo within the next few years. Common sense also tells me that perhaps we should be looking at some of the surrounding towns and do a collaborative with them. I think Holbrook has done this some time ago. In fact, right now, Town of Sharon is putting up a new public safety building. Maybe someone should be talking to Sharon, and they're probably doing the same exercise in their new building. So maybe somebody should be reaching out to Sharon saying, gee, you know, if you're doing this now, what would it cost to have Stoughton become a part of it? Another thing that you could possibly be thinking about is perhaps towns like Stoughton, Canton, and Easton could get together and do one. Some years ago, there was some talk about doing that, and we're going to, I think, locate the facility, I believe, on the grounds of the Canton Hospital School. So, you know, we're talking, as previous speakers have mentioned, there's a lot of money being talked about here, and it seems that we could reach out and look at some other alternatives. It doesn't have to be, it's an electronic communication, it doesn't have to be at the police station, it could be anywhere. The other thing I was going to ask about, if you have to have it at the police station, can this be made up sort of as a modular concept where you could literally go in there with a forklift and lift the module or several modules out of there and put in the new station? It doesn't make a lot of sense to be dumping all this money there and then saying, oh, we're going to build a new station and do this all over again. It does not make sense. And, you know, the finance committee is supposed to be thinking about what the taxpayers are thinking about, and they're thinking about their wallets. So I think there should be a little more research done. There's no particular rush. Some other related items apparently are coming to the spring meeting. Maybe we could do a little research. You know, maybe Sharon says, yeah, you know, for some short money, we'd let you in our system or whatever. But I think before you go ahead, let's do a little more research. And this can easily be dealt with at the spring time. I mean, matter of fact, I don't even know why it's here in a special. So I would just ask that perhaps the committee would think about asking whoever, the selectmen or whoever, to try and look in some of these other areas and perhaps, you know, share the cost with some other folks. Thank you.
Ms. Walsh, did you have a question? Ms. Walsh?
My question is, got nothing to do with you folks. Why are there flashing lights behind you?
I think it's just the light.
The ballast is bad in that light, and it has to be replaced.
Fallon. Fallon.
Peter had it.
Mr. Fallon, go ahead. No, go ahead. You've been waiting patiently. I saw you.
You get Peter?
Hello.
You're next.
James Fallon, Precinct 1. I just wanted to know, is there any way that we could set up this radio stuff in a moving area so we can move it from the police station to the new station that's built?
I said in my presentation, and I'll say again, that of this total amount of money, slightly less than $500,000, all of it, $165,000 worth, will be moved to the new building. I've said that.
It will be moved. Okay, I did not hear that. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Ventresco.
Question was just answered, because I remember at the town meeting when the money was appropriated for these, it was supposed to be moved to a new fire station. So I just, okay. Now, the other question I have was brought up by Mr. Hartman there. The debt exclusion is going to come up in the spring for two buildings, the high school and the public safety. My question on that is, what's that going to do to the tax rate? How much is the average tax person?
We'll talk about that when we get to it. So when they start to do the spring one,
Well, I brought it up because it was
yeah, I
brought
know,
up.
but it's
All right.
just, keep it in your brain because we're going to get to that in the spring. Okay, Ed, go ahead.
On this spreadsheet you just handed out with the numbers, it said the 68,000 for the laptops was coming out, and the 58 for the dispatch consoles is in. Does that mean this is overstated by 68 if you add the math down on the spreadsheet, or?
No, the 68,279 for the laptops is out, but the radios, the fifth line down, I believe, is actually 68,571. So it's
So there's a $10,000 variance there, is what he's trying to say.
I mean, how do you take it out and put the other one in and when they're both in? I don't follow that.
And after meeting with Acting Chief Goldberg, he has indicated that the computers, the laptops for the fire trucks are not part of this package, that that's a standalone package, and that he would prefer we do that at the Springtown meeting. So
Okay,
that
I'm just
part-
looking at the math. You got the 68 in on this, it adds up to the 413. Does that mean it's overstated by 68,000, or does it only be 413 minus 68? Because it's in the numbers. Unless this doesn't add down right and you skip that cell, I don't know, but.
Right, no, the 68,279 is out for laptops. 68,571 is the number for radios, which is probably blank on your sheets.
Yeah, it's blank, right.
That was a
That answers
mistake
the-
on my part.
That answers my question.
Yep.
And the second thing is,
I understand, because it's not
Right,
blank on my
right.
sheet.
That was my mistake.
Okay, and just as a tangent to your debt exclusion, if you put them on the ballot in June, you're going to do two separate questions, one for the station, one for the school?
We're going to talk about that in the spring.
This isn't the time.
It's premature.
And that will be determined by the selectmen.
Yeah. It's a little premature to be going into that for tonight. Could you just say that one more time, because mine is blank too? What is the number that's supposed to be on for the radios?
The radios should be 68,571.
Okay. All right, everybody got that now? So if yours is blank? Yeah.
Print out another one and we'll hand it back out.
Okay, no, that's fine. We can handwrite it and save the tree. Okay? All right. Peter, you good? You're good? Okay. And then we're moving on.
We still have some confusion about the dispatch consoles. You're saying that that's going to be 68,000, correct?
No, that's this number here.
58 and 68 are both in.
So the dispatch consoles,
That's in.
The one that shouldn't be blank is this one,
So you're missing 68,000.
right?
But you can take that from the laptop.
68, okay,
What we had projected,
Cross that same
smart
number out.
board.
right here.
Yes.
So that gets crossed out, so it balances out.
So it's
as far as-
actually $300 more than the total?
We're not gonna-
$300.
We're talking $250,000, 300 is,
Oh, I'm just,
Yeah, it's
3,000
only-
is not
only
that much.
A couple of $100 difference.
Because you're gonna overrun anyways. My question, my concern is the planning committee involved in any of this? Are they looking at what you're planning to do as far as town buildings? Where did this idea come up with? How was it developed is my concern.
this idea? Or,
If you're talking about the idea for central dispatch, it came from the two chiefs 2 years ago.
Right.
They would like a central dispatch.
It's been talked about for years, and I
Yep.
agree with that, but what, my concern is, we keep doing things in piecemeal. And at some point, you're gonna be asking for well over $1 million to complete the whole thought. I think it's easy to say that. Here's $250,000 here. Other things that are gonna go on, gonna be well over $1 million. What I would like to see is some type of a presentation made of where the big scheme is starting from, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. So that way there, to drop $250,000 into this here, some of it's gonna be moved to the next building, what's that gonna cost anticipated? So this way here, everybody's on board, they see something progressing towards a final goal. This is piecemeal to me, that's my concern. And here, well, if you wanna go piecemeal, you ask for $50,000 just to do some renovations, and you haven't even done the work, you scrapped that idea, now you're asking for another, $250,000, but you already have $250,000 in the bank to do some of the work. Again, you keep coming back for bites of the apple, there's only so much of the apple there, and nobody, I don't think, is gonna disagree with safety or anything like that. But if they don't know where it's going,
well, I think that the total we're asking for here, in addition to the 235 already appropriated, will be the whole apple, if you will. So if we began and we had to stop, then you're correct, everything would have continued to be piecemeal. But this, I believe, and according to the professionals that we're dealing with, is the whole number to have the central dispatch at the current police station.
from a personal...
The long-term plan is a new building that contains centralized dispatch. If the new building does not go forth, the old building will contain centralized dispatch through this process.
Okay. What I would like to see, as part of a committee here, as a resident, as someone that's gonna vote on a budget, some type of presentation put together, and we do not do this as a town, we do not do it very well. We ask for a whole bag of dollars all the time, and again, I don't mean to come down on you, this is the way it comes about, all these articles. They ask for 10 cents, $3, boom. Next thing you know, they ask for $250,000. And we had no idea what's leading up to that. Where if you asked for the $250,000 in the first place, you would have got it.
Peter, I think one of the things, but to put it all together, what happened originally was they asked for $50,000 to do some upgrades. And then the chiefs got together and said, you know what, we should just have a central dispatch. So they put that $50,000 on hold. They got together, came up with how much they thought the central dispatch was going to cost, which was, they thought was $250,000 based on the information they could obtain. Then they came back and found out when we got the new building person that that's not possible. We can't possibly do it for $250,000. So that's why they're coming back to the issue. So it's not really piecemeal. They stopped the $50,000 because they said, wait a second, why are we doing this? Well, upgrade now because let's try and get a central dispatch. That's why they stopped the $50,000. It wasn't like, you know what I'm saying? That's
I
where it came.
understand that,
And then they weren't sure on the numbers as far as that. They did the best they could to come up with a number, and it wasn't enough. It was clearly not enough. Now we have a person that's an expert in this, so that's why we're getting accurate numbers now. I think that's the process.
Looking at the clock, all right? Maybe 45 minutes ago, you asked for $250,000 with no explanation. We got this piece of paper, we got to see where it's going. we got something to see where the money's being spent. That's my concern is, we should have some type of plan going forward, what the final cost is gonna be, what we expect next year, the next year after. Now, whether we vote for it or not, fine, but at least we know that this is where we're going. This is at least a starting point. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to Article 7, Muddy Pond.
Let me introduce Phil McNulty. Phil is the new water superintendent, assistant superintendent of public works for water.
Wait a minute, I can't hear because there's a lot of people talking.
This is Philip McNulty, who's very cleaned up from when I saw him earlier today. He is the town's new water superintendent. He's been on the job roughly, what, 8 weeks, 9 weeks? 7 weeks. But he is, in fact, our new assistant superintendent of public works for water and sewer.
Okay, go ahead.
Muddy Pond. Just a little background first. Some of you may be aware of it, some not. But the proposed article is for the design and construction of a conventional groundwater supply well and chemical feed building to replace the existing Muddy Pond supply. The Muddy Pond supply is one of 7 groundwater supply wells the town has, and it's the original groundwater supply for the town, built in the 1890s, and makes it roughly 125 years old at this point. It's a collection, infiltration collection system, and gravity feeds about 1.25 miles to a pump station on Central Street. It's collapsed several times in recent years, and most recently in 2013, and has been out of service since that time. It's a significant water supply well, and supplies about 20% of the demand for the town. So it hurts not to have it. The article is for $1.8 million, based on our consulting engineer's estimate for the scope of work to install the wells, the chemical feed building, permitting, pump test, and bidding and construction. And you also may or may not be aware, we've installed a temporary bypass line that's installed now, and to get that system temporarily up and running in the meantime. So this article is for full replacement of the 125-year-old system that's there now.
Muddy Pond came offline about 2 years ago because of a break in the concrete pipe. The concrete pipe, which dates back to the date Phil talked about, actually runs through a wetland. And it broke underneath the wetland. And has been, like I say, offline for at least 2 years.
Okay, any questions? Go ahead, Mr. Rock, start us off.
You sure you can't squeeze another 5 years out of it? Can't squeeze another 5 years out of it? This sounds like something that really needs to be done. If it's 20% of the town's water supply, it seems pretty essential to me.
It's permitted for 400,000 gallons a day, and the town's demand is roughly around 2 million. So.
Okay, I have a question first that I wanted to bring up. So last time when Mr. Batchelder was here, he was talking to us about a problem with the manganese levels, and I believe that was at Pratt's Court. So is this well water, once you reestablish it, going to pass all of the new EPA standards? Has it been tested, or are we going to be stuck trying to build treatment plants for it too?
Yeah, this particular well site does not have any manganese issues historically.
So everything else, and all the other things that EPA keeps changing,
Good
we're
quality
meeting
water.
its standards?
It's the infrastructure.
Okay, so it's just the infrastructure.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. All right. Mr. Anspino,
I know this says chemical addition facility. Is there one there now, or is this an improvement to the system as well?
It's a very unique type system. It's very unconventional. It's an infiltrator type system that's shallow, on the order of 9-10 feet deep. Typically, they're 50-60 feet deep. And it's almost built like a sewer system where gravity feeds down to Central Street, the old pump station. So the actual source is over a mile away and gets pumped from Central Street out into the system.
But did they do is there any chemical addition done at the existing well, or is this a new?
At present, no. On the bypass that came online today, no. We're asking for this amount in case, going forward, we don't know what DEP is going to do. And we did not want to be in a position of having to go back to a future town meeting. So this 1.8 million anticipates that we have to do a full permitting process with the DEP. If in fact that's not what they require, and we don't know yet what they will require, then we will not need this much money. But rather than venture back a second time, as Phil said, this is one of only 2 what are known as interceptor wells in the state. Most of them have been done away with.
Right.
As we bring this back online, we permanently, rather than the temporary fix we're currently using, we, at this stage of the game, don't really know what DEP is going to require.
But this is going to allow for
This is worst-case scenario.
it's going to include the chemical addition.
That is correct.
Just in case it's needed.
Yes.
All right. And how much does that add to this?
The chemical addition, it's included. It's
No, but the article's for 1.8 million. If you weren't doing it, what would the cost be? In other words, how much does the chemical addition part add to this article? I'm not saying I wouldn't ask you to get rid of it. I'm just
Right.
curious what the addition would be.
It's, let's say less than 100,000 of it. You know, it's
All right.
it includes controls and SCADA controls as well, so it's kind of hard to define exactly. But
All right, no, I just curious, you know, is it 10% of the cost? You know.
chemical addition itself is chlorine for disinfection and pH adjustment.
All right.
Nothing for manganese.
So, yeah, it's not a major component of what the article would fund. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Hanson?
Just a quick question. When they gave us this, for the last article, we were discussing a breakdown. Would it be possible to get something similar to that? I know you didn't have much time to do this, in fact.
Yeah,
no time.
I have the engineer's estimate. I could turn it over and make copies for you guys.
That would be very helpful, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Brown?
Yes. Did you say 20% water supply usage?
Yeah, the source is permitted for 400,000 gallons.
A day?
Per day, yeah.
I know you probably won't be able to answer this, but what have we done for the last 2 years since we haven't used this 20% of water?
MWRA, essentially.
So we've been paying them to... So that made up of...
And that would be what is known as well 3, 3A, and well 4 are the ones with the manganese problems. And we still run those when the manganese levels I can't say it properly, but it varies.
Thank you.
It varies with the groundwater, it varies with how much precipitation you're having over a period of time.
Okay, Mr. Murphy?
I believe Mr. Hanson stole one of my questions. As far as getting a detail of what's going to be covered, if you're asking for 1.8 million, I'd like to see where the money is going. One of the other questions I have is there any type of state funding to assist with that, either through the state or MWRA?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Not that I'm aware of either.
Is there someone that should be looking into if there's any type of funding available from these departments?
I don't know from which department it would be. It does not qualify for any grant program that I'm aware of. The old money that used to be available from the state was actually federal money that came from the Clean Water Act. That dried up a long time ago.
The system, will this include a SCADA system? Will it be able to tie into the whole DPW control system?
Absolutely.
Christine?
You had mentioned that the previous well was around for 120 some odd years. What's the anticipated lifespan of this well and any anticipated additional maintenance costs with it?
Design life is usually 50 years considered, you know.
The other part of the question, would there be any additional maintenance costs with the new well, in addition to the maintenance currently using the temporary bypass system?
Not to avoid, I doubt it. It's usually dependent on the minerals clogging up wells and so forth. We don't have that problem there, and I would anticipate no, very little. The quality of the water is doesn't. Historically, it hasn't had iron and manganese, and that's usually where the maintenance issues come. And clogging up screens and having to regenerate the wells. You know, every well needs some maintenance, but it would be minimal in terms of clogging up screens.
Okay. All right, Ed?
Yeah, of our wells, like 1 to 7, how productive do you consider this particular well out of the 1 to 7?
1 to 7, it probably is the second most.
Second most productive well? Yeah. Okay. And are we going to pay for this through the Water Enterprise Fund, or what's the thought on where it's going to go?
Typically, this would be a cost that would be assigned to the Water Enterprise Fund. But as the Finance Committee knows, the general fund currently supplements the Water Enterprise Fund to the vicinity of $900,000 per year.
Okay, and the TIF agreement dollars that covers supposedly water projects or whatever, I know they just kind of income in, this goes against that kind of thing, the cost. Is that how that would work?
No, the TIF agreements themselves are committed to previous work that's been done. So none of the TIF agreement money would go in the direction towards this 1.8.
Okay, and what about maybe using the building fund dollars to pay for this particular project?
I think that town council would tell you that this is not a building, number one, so you could not go to your building stabilization fund. You could go to the stabilization fund. That requires an extraordinary majority at town meeting, but your stabilization fund is general fund money. This is an enterprise fund. Your water and sewer programs are both enterprise funds.
Yeah, it's semantics, but, okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions from anybody?
Jamie's making copies of the detail right now, Barbara.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Ventresco?
Now, my question is this new line going to follow the existing line, or it's going to be rerouted to be 3 times long and it costs more money?
Yeah, good question. We plan on, the idea is to drill the well at the Muddy Pond site and directly pump it into the system in the vicinity of Bay Road and or Woodpecker, depending on which one is.
Oh, so all you're going to do is pump it up the hill to Bay Road and connect into the existing line?
Yes, either Bay Road or Woodpecker, whichever one makes.
We have a water main on
Yes, on both roads.
Bay Road, because I lived in Bay Road as a kid. All the water was from Sharon.
Yeah, we have a water main there.
We have mains on both roads.
Yeah.
All right, so it's not going to be a big pipe project then?
No, that's kind of the idea, is to get away from that whole mile.
Okay, the other thing is, I'm going to throw out here, everybody worries about the quality of the water in that well. Years ago, when I was a kid, there was hundreds of acres all around there as a watershed. But over the years, the builders have been encroaching on that area for the watershed. I don't know if all the land up there is still town-owned or it's privately owned. If it is privately owned, then people that buy up the land, swamps, everything else for preservation, they should be buying all that land around that well to protect that well.
Yeah, we are required at each well location to own a 400-foot radius around each well source, and we have that there.
Yeah, but that's not enough, because that well is low, and all the surrounding land climbs up pretty high.
No, it's more than that. I'm just saying that's the minimum requirement. We have more than that. And actually, it's a swath that goes from Muddy Pond all the way to Central Street.
Yeah, that's the SWAT going down, but that's
Yeah.
not...
No, that's not the location
That's not the
itself.
watershed itself.
Yeah, welcome.
Mr. DeFelice?
Ironically, this 1.8 million is the same number we paid for to join the MWRA. When we joined the MWRA, supposedly, that was going to prevent us from dealing with these types of situations. So I guess my question is, what do we get from the MWRA? Because that was one of the selling points, was that, you know, we would have to maintain our wells, but they weren't going to necessarily be the main source of water. So I'm a little confused there that after joining that system, we're spending a ton of money to fix this well. I'm just wondering how that works.
We signed up for 500,000 gallons maximum from the MWRA per day. We're actually drawing more than that now, but that was the original agreement. The MWRA is willing to sell us all the water we want. The problem is that, you know, we would have to run another pipe through the town of Canton, and you all remember what that cost.
Well, I don't know what that costs. That's part of the problem. That's something we probably should know. What is that cost? You know,
Total cost of running that pipe through Canton and hooking up the MWRA was $5 million. Approximately 1.8 of it went to the town of Canton.
I realize that. But you're talking about perhaps running, I think what you were alluding to is running another pipe from Canton, I guess. There was some talk about bringing one up through, off of Pleasant Street in Canton or something or other. I don't know whatever happened to that, whether we're still pursuing that or not. Maybe that should be pursued also at some point, just to have that additional insurance. But thanks for the information. I didn't realize that we were limited to the 500,000 gallons or
We're
something?
actually getting more than 500,000.
We're getting more than that, yeah.
The original thought was we would draw 500,000 gallons per day.
Okay, thank you.
I think we're close to 700,000 or 800,000 on some days, depending upon
Okay.
what the water demand.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's it for that one? Oh, you have a question?
Well, now that we have the
Okay.
detail sheet,
All right.
which is $100,000 less than what's in the article, but the thing that catches my eye is it says the chemical addition facility is $800,000 out of the 1.8 million.
Yeah, well, that includes the whole building and all the, you know, everything. Just the chemical, just the chemical addition setup is what I thought you were trying to break out.
All right. I mean, you see what I mean? It's a big difference than,
I see up in the top, the facility, so you're close to, actually, half of this would be for the chemical addition facility. Right, but you're closer to 50% of the article.
That's correct.
And any reason the article is $100,000 more than what we were just given?
Can you say that again?
The breakdown we were given says, they say go for $1,725,000, which rounded up from the $1,721,000. And the article's for $1,825,000. So where did the extra 100 come from? Just in case?
I don't know where it came from.
1.8 is what John Batchelder came in with. I believe that John's practice has been to round up. In other words, if he gets an estimate for 1.7 and change, he rounds up to 1.8 so he doesn't have to come back. I think he does that based on the philosophy that we're never going to spend more than's been appropriated anyway, and we're only going to spend what the project costs. This one end up costing us as little as 400, 500K. We simply don't know.
Okay,
Yeah, I just,
okay. Mr. Murphy, one last question, then we'll move on.
Just to kind of go back over those figures, you asked, it says 1,725,000. You built in 25% total project contingencies, so you already built in a little bit of extra fat, so to speak, and then you throw another 100,000. It's $500,000 basically in fat if I'm going to round up. If I go for 444, let's round it up to $500,000 in fat in the total project.
Well, this is typical, at this conceptual stage, that's what you need to do, so that you don't lowball yourself, and then you end up with, if the project comes in higher than that, then you don't have a project.
So, all right, thank you.
I guess to build on that, Peter, under the statute, even if, say, we bid this out and the project came at 1.9, under the statute, we can't proceed. We cannot enter into an agreement for more than we have appropriated. That is the law. So we would have to go back to a special town meeting to ask for an additional 100K if it actually came in more. That's why we round up, bearing in mind that we never spend more than we need.
I understand that, and all I'm saying is that it says ask for 1,725,000. Had that said 1,825,000, we wouldn't be discussing this. Thank you.
The other problem that I always have is that when you come up with these numbers, then the people that are bidding kind of know what they should bid. So I feel like if you put it up high, then they're not going to come in low because they know you can spend that much. So it's kind of a catch-22 here, you know. If we give you that much, they'll bid that much.
When you go out to bid on any project, you always have to put the engineer's estimate there, and some contractors look at it and it influences them, others don't.
That's a matter of state law. That's actually the ad that goes to the Senate registry.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think Laurie wants to ask one question. We'll let him. Go ahead, Mr. Laurie. The absolute last question on this one.
I just have a simple question just for the record. So when it comes in short, because we're assuming that we've overestimated, where does that money go if we come in under the actual allocation from town meeting?
If you recall at past town meetings, Bill Rowe, who's not here right now, he will prepare an article, generally at the request of the FinCom, that will list a whole series of articles where you're either rescinding that borrowing capacity or you're using it on a different project. So if you take a look at the FinCom recommendations throughout the years, I know at town meeting, you will see maybe 18 different funding sources for an article. That's how these things, so if you appropriate the 1.8 and we end up spending, I don't know, say we really only spend 400,000, that's one we would probably go back to town meeting and get rescinded. On the other hand, if you appropriated 1.8 and we spent 1.65, the FinCom would consider whether or not we could use the additional 150K for another water project. You would be limited. Typically, what you've done is you have rescinded your borrowing capacity. We don't borrow until we're generally done with the project. So what we do is we will start this project with BANs, which is bond anticipation notes. And once we are done with the project and we know what it costs, then the treasurer will package it with a much larger bond issue. Because the larger the bond issue, the better the return we're going to get when people bid on it. So technically we don't, she will, for a project like this, say it came in at 1.5, that's all she would issue bans for. She wouldn't issue bans for 1.8. We never really borrow more than the project is, and we don't borrow until we know what the cost is, and then we borrow with bans, which are short-term notes.
Okay, so you're done, right?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn Municipal Operations Committee from this meeting. All in favor? Thank you, Phil. We'll reconvene
Good night, Peter.
Okay, we're going to go back to number 2. We just kind of did that out of order so that they could get going.
Let me go get Bill Rowe, because Bill
Please
Rowe's
do.
number 2.
What?
I don't think so.
Okay, go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. So Article 2, as you may or may not know, any bill that we incurred in a prior fiscal year, after the books are closed, we have to, has to be appropriated by town meeting. So that's what these are. There's 3 of them. We had another one come in today, not a big one, $91, something like that, from Cedar Hill. So we may have a couple more at town, before town meeting to add in. So requires, I think special town meeting requires a 9/10 vote to pay those. So generally has not been a problem in the past to get those approved. So obviously we like to stay in good faith with the vendor. They're not, probably not happy that they have to wait, but it's the way the law is. So.
Okay, I have a question.
Yep.
So you obviously had to have these things fixed, or whatever, from these vendors. Where was the money originally? Like, was it in the budget? Was it an appropriation?
Would have been in the budget, right. Mm-hmm.
So these were budgetary costs, all right. So I thought, and perhaps I'm incorrect when I thought this, when you were spending money, you made an appropriation and then didn't you, what's the word? Thank you. You encumbered it. Right. Mm-hmm. So when these bills did not come in, what did you do with the encumbered money? So obviously you knew you had to spend $427.50 in 2013.
Right.
And then you didn't spend it. So what happened to the money?
Well, the encumbrance would get closed. We still have an operational issue as far as purchase orders being prepared prior to incurring the work. We still have departments that will just pick up the phone, call up, say, hey, do the work. I can remember one year, you may have been on the board, Barbara, at the time, somebody had done the work, put the bill in the drawer, never paid it, and the contractor came in, and we had to go to the FinCom to get a transfer at the end of the year, so.
Okay, so you feel like maybe you're moving in a better direction
We're moving in
now?
a better direction,
Okay.
yes. We're
So-
trying, normally, these would be encumbered prior to doing the work, and then if, the invoice wasn't received, we would see the encumbrance on the books. And, you might click and say, oh yeah, I haven't paid that guy. Call him up and say, where's your bill, But,
Okay, and so these people have been very patient apparently, right?
yeah, there was, I think one had some bookkeeping problems, and the other one, I'm not sure what.
Okay. And you're confident that we really owe these bills? You feel that after looking at the paperwork that these are
Well, they have
legitimate?
to, yeah, they have to be certified by the vendors. We need to get we'll get a certification from them that they're owed this money. It will be signed off on by the vendor and by the department head, so,
Okay.
yeah.
And you said that you think there'll be a couple more before town,
Yeah, we have one more came in today, Cedar Hill, and there could be a couple more. They
Okay.
pop up, especially this time of year. Not so much in the spring, but this time of year, because it's, the end of the fiscal year and stuff, so.
okay. Ed, you had a question?
Yeah, what is the Bill Trust for $4,000? Is that a person's name? Is that a trust? Or what is
No,
it?
that's a company name. They are involved with preparing and mailing the real estate, or the property tax bills. Yeah. I'm not sure why it lapsed. The Treasurer's Department, so.
Okay, Elliot?
Just a very short question.
You don't have to answer it.
It says 6299.45 to be raised in the tax, shouldn't that be from the tax revenue, tax levy? Just a wording error. Or am I mistaken on that?
I don't know. Could go either way. I don't think it's an error. I think it's a matter of interpretation.
Okay, Peter?
Yes, when it says to be raised in the tax levy,
Right.
you mean this coming year?
Fiscal 16 levy, yeah. Mhm.
Okay,
Right.
so this bill was either missed or ignored for 2013, or
I'm sorry, Peter.
was, these bills that are outstanding,
They just didn't come in time to be paid.
you mean they never said, the vendor didn't submit the bill?
Correct,
within those years, and now we're going to ask taxpayers to pay for
Yeah.
these bills?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Ansvino?
My question was asked and answered, thank you.
Yay. Okay, any other questions? Okay, Mr. DeFelice?
Just a general question. Why aren't these just paid out of transfers from the FinCom? I mean, you've got people waiting a considerable amount of time for money. Why can't we just do it through transfers?
Because once you close the books, it becomes a prior year bill, and state law requires that prior year bills must be approved by the legislative body, which in our case is town meeting, by a 90% majority. That's what the statute says. And as Bill just pointed out, these people didn't submit the bills until after we closed our books.
You can see one of them is from one is from fiscal 13, the other is from fiscal 14. So they're not even from the last fiscal year. They're from 2 and 3 years ago, so.
Okay, all set? All right, let's move on to number 3. Supplemental fiscal year 2016 departmental budgets.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, so the IT director position for the town side was the one that we talked about before.
That is correct, and in fact, Ryan snuck out on me. He was supposed to be here to help with that one. It hasn't changed from last time. We did, in fact, get an appropriation from you all for $10,000 to hire a consultant. The person we were talking to as a potential employee was not interested in becoming a consultant. So we're still in the process of looking on that regard. But as I indicated at that time, it was my belief and the belief of the superintendent of schools that the most prudent way to handle this would be with an employee at about 1/3 less than we would pay a consultant.
Okay, and the next one was the Muddy Pond Water Department reimbursement.
When Phil was here, he talked about the temporary fix that went online today for Muddy Pond. This was work that the Board of Selectmen, as water commissioners, deemed essential, especially in light of our water ban and our manganese problems. Rather than wait for a town meeting, the board wanted to get it online as quickly as they could to help alleviate the situation we had. So we did we bid everything in accordance with the statute, awarded a bid, and we used the operational budget of the water department to take care of this. At that time, the board understood that it would be necessary to subsequently amend the water department budget because it really cannot withstand a hit of $145,000. Had it been $45,000, maybe, but not $145,000. So that's what that is. That is the over-the-ground solution that Phil talked about, that is now up and running.
Okay, and buyouts?
We are anticipating 3 long-term employees who, when you add up their tenure with the town, it approaches 120 years, of the Public Works Department will be retiring. One of them has already announced the date. One of them has not, and one of them has already indicated that he would not be here for any Christmas events. So we know that it's coming, we just don't know when. Under the provisions of their contract, they have a right to get a buyout of their sick leave and their vacation time that's unused. And this is literally the same situation you see with up above when you add these totals together. The thought was that these budgets could not withstand that much of a hit this early in the year. Even more importantly, as we discussed with the Board of Selectmen, these are 3 very critical individuals. Typically, what would happen if somebody further down the chain retires? We simply don't replace them until we've recovered the cost of the buyout. All 3 of these people will be replaced as quickly as we can replace them.
Do you anticipate a salary savings by hiring somebody who hasn't been working here this long?
I anticipate, in one case, yes. In the other case, there would be a salary savings, but it would be slight. And in the third case, we are actually considering some changes to that position, additional responsibilities. And that is basically the position of the town's head mechanic. We have talked in the past with this group about the need for a fleet manager. And so we would probably try to recruit a combination fleet manager, head mechanic.
And you don't anticipate additional costs?
No, we're not asking for that. That's why we're asking to cover the buyouts in a budget amendment, rather than rather than the additional cost piece. We think that with what's left in the budget, we can replace those 3 people with little difficulty.
Okay, John?
I just want to go back to the Muddy Pond thing. You said that they could handle 45,000 of the 145,000 in the budget. So why don't we just go with 100,000?
Well, we didn't look at that. I'm saying what I said was I thought it could better handle 45 than 145. But I know for a fact it can't handle 45. Or excuse me, 145. If you want us to look at the 45, we're willing to look at that, much in the same way.
Yeah,
Ryan said he's willing to look at that.
I would definitely prefer that. I mean, that's $45,000 that if you already have enough in the budget, I know it's told to get returned back in at the end, but I'd rather just not put it out up front. So that's all.
Yeah. But the 145 does in fact represent what we have spent just on the bypass.
Okay, Joe?
Just a quick question. These buyouts, are we replacing this personnel within, or are we going outside to replace them?
All I'm really comfortable saying publicly, because there's a recruitment process, all 3 of them will be replaced. Whether or not they would be replaced from within would depend upon who applies.
So we're not grooming at the moment?
At this stage of the game, one of those positions has a potential candidate, yes.
Okay.
But only one.
Thank you.
Mr. Anspino?
Can we get a breakdown on what you spent?
Muddy Pond?
Yeah.
I don't have it with me, but sure.
No, but I mean, just...
I can tell you this is a number in trying to close the warrant that I got from John Batchelder.
Just for the records, anyway.
We'll provide that to you.
Thank
I'll
you.
have Jamie send it to you via email.
Thank you.
Ed?
Yeah, do we have any idea how much free cash we have from last year, or turnbacks to fund all this extra stuff we're asking for?
Well, these would be,
Gotta wait for the,
oh, wait for
go ahead.
Okay. We have, free cash expires on June 30, so that balance is zero, the certified free cash. We have roughly, it's not finalized yet, but we have roughly 900,000 left in the tax levy which is available to fund these projects.
Is
That's
that
the difference-
separate from the
that's difference
turnbacks?
That's the difference between the million one that we expect to be certified for new growth, new property tax growth, and the 250 that we had estimated at town meeting. So,
Ed, the turnbacks you're talking about will not be available for expending in this fiscal year. They're not available until the next fiscal year.
Oh, really? Okay.
And that money that is going to be certified and available soon, right? Because the DOR has to.
probably tomorrow, yeah, we'll probably have the final number.
Okay, so
Joe
we'll know.
Gibbons thinks he'll have the final growth number, definitely this week. The recap is set for, well, the recap will have to wait till after town meeting to send in, but yeah. But the new growth will be certified this week.
So we'll be allowed to spend it.
Oh, yeah, sure, yep, yep.
Okay. Okay, John?
Yeah, so refresh my memory, the IT position, is that to implement the in-house payroll system?
The IT system is to, again, the impact of the installation of the new software, which includes more than just the payroll system. The payroll system is what we're presently working on, has been more than the current IT staff can handle. So this is a position that is being added to IT with the expectation that we're looking at another 2.5 to 3 years worth of installation of software under the package we bought.
But we're trying to get payroll done before January 1st?
Yes,
And are you still using Harper's in the meantime?
we are still using Harper's in the meantime.
You know they've had a problem, right?
Yeah, yes, we've read about that problem. That problem seemed to involve their own employees more than anything else. They weren't stealing from their clients, they were stealing from their employees. That's
Well,
what
that
I
makes
read
it
in the
better
paper.
then. That's okay. And the other thing is, future negotiations, I really think we need to try to negotiate out of this sick leave buyback.
I guess, without going in it too deep,
it's-
I would say that the selectmen are aware of that. They have been aware of it. You have to remember that once you give your rank and file something, you know, especially on a buyout, you have to buy it back. It's a dance.
Well,
It doesn't come
at some
free.
point, we're going to have to stop dancing because, unless we cut out things like that, we're going to have to cut out things that really, matter a lot more.
I
So,
believe that you would find the selectmen unanimously agree with you.
You want some? Okay.
I got one more question.
Okay, go ahead.
You mentioned, I'm glad you reminded me, that we had authorized 10,000 for you to get a consultant, which you don't think you're going to be going. Do we expect that you're going to return that to the Finance Committee's reserve fund?
If I don't use it, and Bill tells me it's possible to do that, yes.
Well, I mean, it was specifically for a consultant to be
Correct.
used in conjunction with the money you had.
In the meantime, we are still trying
so-
we are still trying to procure the services of a consultant, because again, if this goes to town meeting and it's turned down, I'm still going to need
Right.
the consultant.
But I mean, should the consultant not be hired, then I expect that we'd get that money back in the reserve.
If Bill tells me it's possible, yes. I'm not certain what the mechanism would be. That's the accountant's call, not
Well,
mine.
Bill, how would you do that, Bill, if you've authorized something for a specific purpose and the purpose doesn't come to fruition? How would you get the money back?
You can rescind that vote and take the money back, sure. That's
All
no
right.
problem, yeah.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say one thing on the IT position. I hope you folks, can support it.
You know, as you know, I have been working many extra hours, trying to get the accounting caught up, you know, short staff. We tried to hire somebody. She quit after 3 days, full-time clerk. You know, which I don't mind working. I love the job. I love the people I work with. You know, I really do love the job. My wife's not too happy with the extra hours. But, you know, you come to work, you plan out your day, and then you got an email. Bill, I can't do this. You get a phone call. Bill, I don't have permission to do this. Well, you got to contact IT, you know, this and that. Bill, I'm trying to get this bill paid, this and that. Before you know, there's 2 to 3 hours out of your day that's gone. Trying to help, you know, people process their payables, basically. Wow. So, you know, this person, I think, would be primarily dedicated to Munis. General ledger and accounts payable have been successfully implemented. You know, it took us a couple of months to get the bugs out. It's flowing good now. The warrants are on time. The town and school warrants are on time. But yeah, we've got, you know, payroll coming online, 1/1/16. You know, you know, if a vendor will wait for the, you know, we don't like to have the vendors wait, obviously, but you know, you're late with your payroll. You're talking about treble damages, not just the person that complains, but the Department of Labor could come in and do a whole investigation. Every employee could be subject to treble damages, you know, if they want to push it. Not likely, but you don't want to be late with people's paychecks, you know. Fiscal 17, we plan on going online with property tax and excise tax, so that's another whole thing. Yep. And then utility billing, we have that to implement. So we got a lot of work, and it will be really helpful to have somebody knowledgeable with Munis. That's it.
Fiscal 18, we will go live with a permitting package that ties it all together.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're done.
Ed?
New position. Have you decided whether to be on the school side or the town side? And this is more of a technical coding job right now. Down the road, when we're implemented in 2 years, what's this person going to be doing beyond that?
That would be determined by the IT director. To me, the simple answer of that is if we no longer need the person would be laid off. I can say that the Board of Selectmen, when they looked at this article, indicated rather strongly that they want to see this position fully dedicated to the town. And I can tell you we have plenty of work for this position. At that meeting, Ryan happened to be present. Ryan committed to the board that it would be fully dedicated to the town if it is in fact approved.
Okay, Mr. Kruparow?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I'm one of the people who was adamant that this should be fully dedicated to the town, and speaking to what Mr. Rose said, that he'll be focusing on Munis, I hope not. Actually, $45,000 strikes me as about half what a good IT person would be making today, and I hope as we go forward, we're able to put more services, and town manager, what he just said sounded very encouraging. I've heard it before, and I trust him that he's accomplishing that, because he certainly heard, Mr. Anzavino can tell you this, that since we served on the board, I was chirping about IT issues. I just think we can do a whole lot more servicing our residents through computers and through the web, and we can increase how we efficiently serve people just through one position. And actually the issue was, the reason I don't want to speak for the town manager, but I think the entire issue is that we can't get the person who is supposed to be allocated for this from the school department, that they anticipated he would be working more on town business, but he isn't able to, and in fact our computer needs, because of Munis conversion, have been vastly, I don't want to speak for the town manager again, but have been vastly more labor intensive than we ever imagined. So I hope you support this, and I hope someday we can support a full-time professional who can really bring us into an age where we can utilize computers and technology very well. Thank you.
Okay, and the 45, just to clarify, the $45,000 is just for 6 months, right? It's not their salary.
That is correct.
It's just for the 6
Mr.
months.
Rakupo is correct. This would be a position going forward when we did the budget would be in the neighborhood of $75,000 to $80,000.
Right, and that will be incorporated into the next year's budget.
If it's approved, yes,
If it's
that would be
approved.
our intent. Actually, the next 2 budgets at a minimum.
And we talked last time that all their benefits and everything are taken care of by what's in those
Correct.
accounts at the present time. Okay, did you want to say something?
I wanted to add in was, we keep talking, the Munis is for the whole town and school. It's not just for the town. So when you keep saying, oh, they don't want to give us the IT person for the town stuff from Munis, it's for them too. It's not just the town. So it's kind of misleading by saying it that way.
Yeah, when we started out, John, we knew we would need IT support. The school department thought they could give us more of a particular individual's time because this is more than just a tech position. It turned out that they're not able to deliver that. It's really that simple. They can't deliver that. We can't get the time we anticipated.
It's because they added some other stuff on their end, wasn't it?
Pardon?
Didn't they add more stuff on their end that the person had to do?
That might be the case. That's why I was hoping Ryan would stick around.
Yeah.
Because he can explain it.
I thought there was some more computer programs that were going on.
The board asked this question. I don't know if it's a result of their need for more time or if it's a result of the fact that maybe we had a steeper learning curve than they anticipated. Maybe Munis is more complex than we thought it was going to be. You know, it's clearly we're not getting the IT support. And what happens is traditionally in this town, in the old IT system, they would call Bill, which is why they're calling Bill now. And it does take up a significant portion of his week. And, you know, that his other work suffers.
I just wanted to say this person would not only be more like probably a system administrator, but not only that, would be able to go around and actually sit at people's desks and say, here's how you do it. Haven't really had that. We've had a group session at the fire station, but you know, the best result, when we went to decentralized voucher entry, Candy DuPont, my clerk, she went around to all the various departments and actually sat with them, showed them how to do it. And I think that's really what you need. So this person would be able to do that. And I think that's real important, and it would help the administrative people and the department heads feel more comfortable and not, you know, not hanging out there, not sitting out there alone like they're, okay, what do I do? Well, I got to contact IT. How long am I going to have to wait for IT to fix that? You know what I mean? So I think this person would be not just a technician, but a good teacher as well. So.
Mr. Okrisky?
So this is a position that I think is well overdue, is going to save us time, money, and better serve the residents as well. There's a lot we can do, you know, just like
Okay. You all set, Ed? Go ahead.
A theory question in the sense that I know the budgets are getting tight. I don't know if you have any numbers for next year you put together, but if we come up short and you got to make a decision as to what happens in the future, is it the first in, last out kind of thing, or hate to hire somebody and then next year we're short or the year after and you got to make some hard decisions? I'm just kind of curious about that.
I guess in terms of in the door, out the door, that is, for the most part, we're heavily unionized, as you know. We have a handful of non-union employees, fewer than 20. It would be my intent that this would be a non-union position, but that doesn't mean another union can't come along and claim the position. It happens. But if we have to lay off, which I'm not anticipating at this end of Pearl Street in this coming budget. There is, for want of a better way of putting it, a pecking order defined by our 7 different collective bargaining units.
Okay, let's move on now. I know we talked about Article 5 before, but we actually had made a motion to not discuss it then, so let's just make sure that nobody here has any other questions on Article 5. We pretty much answered them all during the, yes, you have a question?
You can't have questions, you work here.
No, just a comment. The article is entitled Rescind Unissued Borrowing Authorizations. Upon research, when we went to do the motions, we noticed that those 3, the first 2 of the money's already been borrowed, and the last one is a free cash article. So what we've done is we're going to be, if you look at Article 6, we're going to take the proceeds from those 3 articles and partially fund Article 6, if you read the motion on Article 6. That's all.
So you're going to make a motion to dismiss Article 5 then? Okay.
All right, so we're moving on to 8. What? The CPC here? Is there anybody here who wants to talk? Good.
Are they still in there?
They're having a separate hearing, so it's okay.
Good evening, I'm Forrest Lindwall from the Stoughton Redevelopment Authority. The Community Preservation Committee is meeting in there, and if you go knock on the door and ask John Morton to come out, he said he would come out.
Okay, thank you.
I'll get him.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. I can start on Article 8. Excuse me, in 2013, the Redevelopment Authority was working on behalf of the Board of Selectmen, if you will, to acquire the depot train station building from the MBTA. And in that process, we thought that there was some water intrusion within the building and whatever, that we put that article forward, and town meeting supported the expenditure of $250,000 for basically repairing the envelope of the train station. Given that our efforts to work this out with a private operator based on financing in a poor real estate market did not happen, so we did not go forward with that expenditure of the $250,000. So I think if you read through on Articles 9 and 10, where Community Preservation Committee and the Redevelopment Authority, working with the Board of Selectmen in partnership, are looking to purchase and rehab the station in a different manner. We would rescind, and it was Community Preservation Committee's recommendation to rescind that $250,000. That's not going to be spent at all, so that seems to be quite simple.
Okay, so I just have one little question for you. So the money that was originally going to be used to buy the building was not authorized by town meeting. It was going to come from the Redevelopment Authority?
No, it was authorized in 2013 by town meeting.
No, that was the rehab. I'm talking about the money to actually buy the building.
Different article.
That was not part of the issue at that point in time, no.
So it never came before town meeting and
No,
had
it did
money?
not,
Okay,
no.
that's, I just wanted to make sure about that.
Sorry.
Different action. Yes.
Because it seems like these are going to keep overlapping each other. Could we just make a motion to discuss all 3 at once, since it seems like the things are going to keep, I'll make a motion to discuss all 3 articles at once.
Second.
And that probably does make sense.
Aye.
Okay, good. Okay.
And does the CPC have to vote on that as well? Or-
I don't think, did they-
Are you guys still in session, John?
John, your meeting for these articles is not now, right?
You'll have to forgive me. My hearing is bad, and the acoustics in this room are extraordinarily
You're telling
difficult.
me.
But I have my interpreter here, my trusty
Okay.
interpreter.
Okay, so the question that I wanted to ask the CPC was, is this going to be a joint meeting, or are you hearing, so you need to open and everything else?
We've already opened.
So you're good?
Meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
We just
moved out.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we're all set, that this is going to cover.
We are engaged in an open meeting in that room, and the meeting is continuing here.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we're following procedures. Okay, so he explained a little bit about the rescinding, so do you want to talk about the purchasing and the rehabbing?
Let me start by saying the CPC really doesn't, for the most part, initiate requests for fundings. It responds to them. We have responded to a request to buy the train station. That request first came through the Stoughton Redevelopment Authority. When the Redevelopment Authority's ability to buy it fell through because of I guess the failure of a proposed lease, it came back to us purportedly through the Board of Selectmen to buy the building and to fund the stabilization of the building, not the total renovation of the building. The commission considered it after 2 or 3 meetings and decided decided that the building was a vital part of the history of the town, and that the acquisition of the building was quite important. It came to us with the support of the Board of Selectmen and the Stoughton Redevelopment Authority. Based on that, the committee was inclined to vote to buy the building. We were informed that there was a deadline of December 31 at that price, and that if we did not buy the building, it would be put out to bid. Who knows what would have happened then? Perhaps the price would have been higher, or perhaps it would have been lower. But we had the chance to buy it now for $350. The committee voted pretty much unanimously, I believe it was unanimously, to support the Board of Selectmen and to support the Redevelopment Authority in the acquisition of the building. It then became clear that if we bought the building and we did nothing, it would continue to deteriorate, and that there were certain things that needed to be done to it to stabilize it, to protect it. Now keep in mind, I think it was 2 years ago, correct me if I'm wrong, it may have been 1 year ago, the town meeting, with the recommendation of the CPC, voted $250,000 to stabilize the building. That was approved by town meeting, and it is an article that's still out there. And basically, that $250,000 has already been approved by town meeting and is already available to be spent. But it was spent under a different circumstance. The article that was approved by town meeting was spent knowing that the Stoughton Redevelopment Authority was going to buy it, and the proposal at that time was to flip the building. They would buy it, and there was a person interested in operating it as a restaurant, and they were in the process of negotiating a long-term lease with that person, or a sale of the building to that person. But that person was insisting, and the SRA at that time was insisting, that the building be stabilized. So what was originally envisioned was that the Stoughton Redevelopment Authority would buy the building, $250,000 of CPA funds would be used to stabilize the building, and then the Stoughton Redevelopment Authority would sell it and pay back the Community Preservation Fund for the $250,000 that was used to stabilize the building. That was the nature of the article. That was the nature of the approval. That article is still out there. Then that lease negotiation somehow fell through. I was not party to it. I can't explain the background, but it didn't happen. So that at that point, the Redevelopment Authority and the Board of Selectmen decided that they would insert an article into this special town meeting to buy the building based on the premise that the $350,000 was an appraised value, and by the way, the CPC received a current third-party, a competent appraisal showing that the value of the building was in excess, well, $1 in excess of $350,000, so that that appraisal is not simply based on the state's asking price. It is based on a competent, this thick appraisal of the property. Based on that request from the Board of Selectmen and the Stoughton Redevelopment Authority, the commission, the CPC voted unanimously to buy the building and to rescind the $250,000 article previously approved to restore and stabilize the building. Simultaneously, we would insert, at the request of the Board of Selectmen and the Redevelopment Authority, a new article for the same $250,000 to stabilize the building. So the additional cost, if you take into account that the $250,000 was previously approved, is the $350,000 asking price. Both of those warrant articles are bonding articles, so that the purchase price and the restoration, renovation, preservation price would be bonded at the, for times, the longest possible period of time. That's within the authority of the CPA and the town meeting.
If I could just clarify a couple of points on that. What happened was, given the real estate market in the tight money financial situation, the prospective developer that we had just could not gain his financing, and at the 11th hour, which was this past March, just simply had to step back. So what happened was Redevelopment Authority came to the Board of Selectmen. We explained that situation to them, and what ensued from that meeting was a partnering, if you will, from the Board of Selectmen, a letter to us, and from us, a letter to them, to agree to work together to go back to the MBTA, obtain additional time to go through this process, and they gave us until the end of the year with the understanding that we would apply to Community Preservation Committee for funds, and that the town would purchase it, not the Redevelopment Authority. We're just working alongside of the Board of Selectmen because we've been involved with it going back to the interim town manager and prior chairman of the Board of Selectmen. Redevelopment spent well over $25,000 in due diligence. We've done all of those documents that the MBTA has approved. That's we did survey, title search, appraisal, and an inspection with a cost estimate to do the renovation, both exterior and interior. And also there was and that was about $350,000 if we used prevailing wage rates. The town's building inspector at that time also came up with about the same number. That would be to button up the exterior, but also to redo the interior to what I would call a vanilla box, which means the walls and the ceiling interior are fine. The bathrooms need to be done. The heating system needs to be done. Not the boiler, but right now there are radiators sitting in the middle of the floor, and the floor needs to be done. So the additional $100,000 is both inflation plus the cost of redoing the interior such that a prospective tenant can look at it and say, okay, I can move in here, my bathrooms are ADA compliant, I have clean walls and clean floor and a heating system that functions, all I've got to do is my tenant fit up, which makes it obviously far more marketable.
I'd like to say a couple of other things. Since this is our portion of this public hearing, the CPC is prepared to respond to questions from you and from the public with respect to its vote to recommend the approval. With respect to the ultimate use of the building and so on, the CPC would refer the discussion to the Board of Selectmen, and if the SRA still has a role to play, the SRA, which is, I'd say the people from the Stoughton Redevelopment Authority are most familiar with the details of what has to be done in the ultimate use of the building. But we're here as the CPC, we have a quorum, our entire committee is here, and we are prepared to answer any questions that deal with the decision of the CPC to recommend these 3 articles. There are 3 articles. One is the rescission of the $250,000 previously awarded by the town meeting with our recommendation. The second is the $350,000 for the purchase of the railroad station. And the third is the $250,000 to replace the $250,000 that was revoked. Our role as the CPC is we simply recommended that those be done based on the presentations of the redevelopment authority, the history of the case, the importance we felt of the station to the central historic preservation of the center, and the need to stabilize the building. So I would welcome any questions that anyone might have regarding the CPC's role in these articles.
Okay, so one thing that I would like for you to get to me and the committee so we can put it in the book is, you know how in the spring when you have recommendations, you always give us a little report that says like how much you guys have in your account and how much you actually owe. We would like to see that, up to date so that we have an idea of what you're doing.
I think, Barbara, what you're referring to is there's 2 roles the CPC has. Use the microphone, please. Sorry. There's 2 roles that the CPC, the Community Preservation Committee, has. One more of a micro, which is. Okay. Is this working? Okay, thank you. Let me try this one more time. So we have sort of a macro role and a micro role. Our macro role is what the chair was referring to. In November, typically, we hold a public hearing regarding the finances, if you will, of the Community Preservation Committee. Our role here tonight, as John was just alluding to, is as a co-participant of this joint public hearing on these articles. We are not the applicant for these articles. We make a recommendation to town meeting, and as far as tonight's forum is concerned, we are a co-participant with the other standing committees to answer any questions that either members of the standing committees may have or members of the public may have. But I want to just reiterate what John alluded to, which is in terms of the merits, if you will, of the article, I think that would be more appropriately responded to the extent that folks have questions about that, by either the Board of Selectmen or the Redevelopment Authority.
Just to carry that one step farther, we were satisfied as a committee that this was a significantly important acquisition and project to allocate CPC funds to. We think that we voted that the station is a very important part of the history of Stoughton and should be protected and preserved. We also voted that once we acquired it, we should do what we needed to do to protect it and stabilize it. After that, we were hopeful that the Board of Selectmen and the Redevelopment Authority would find an appropriate use for it, and we are confident that they will, because the restoration of that building will go a long way to demonstrating the commitment of this town to the center. If we don't, as a town, demonstrate our commitment to the center, how can we expect private investors to come in and invest in our center? So we have to invest in ourselves first, and then we hope and believe that others will trust us and come in and also invest in the center.
Okay. Does anybody have any?
Yeah, I think you were asking for.
What's that? Well, I got a whole list of people that want a question.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't think she.
Right, I just wanted to make sure that you guys have enough money. That's all I was asking for, your little budget. That's all I want, is just to make sure that I see it. Yeah.
gave that out, that spreadsheet out to the town meeting.
Yeah, that's all I'm asking. If
Just
you
where
could
where
get
you
that to me.
stand.
Just wants to know what's in the fund for the historic, that's
That's
all.
all. Not tonight. You don't need to give it to me tonight.
No,
Just,
not
you know.
now. No.
Yeah, the budget. That's all I'm asking.
Pass it out.
Yeah, that's all I want, with the updates for what you spent. Yeah.
Right.
I know, but I would like. Yeah. Well, I know, but town meeting is going to want it, so let's, you know,
With
get
the
it and
updates.
get it into the book and.
The town, that's not really a CPC committee report, that's a report that comes out of the town accounting office.
Okay,
What you're asking the CPC to produce, I think more appropriately, the question.
okay.
We file a report with the state called the CP2, which details out all the revenues and expenses and the fund balances for the prior fiscal year, so June 30, 2015. And it's just a 2-page report. That would be a good outline to tell you what.
Yeah, that's all
tell
we
you what
want.
they have.
Just-
I mean, off the top of my head, I think at the end of 14, they had like 2.9 million.
Yeah,
I mean, we're collecting 650, 700,000 a year. I mean, they haven't really borrowed that much. So, I mean, there's
right,
no
and I
question there's
just want that number
plenty
so
of
that
funds.
town meeting has it, because you know people are going to ask for it, so that's all I'm asking. Okay, all right. So let's see, you want to go first? Go ahead, John.
A quick question. You said something back there. So the MBTA required that the redevelopment authority not be the buyer? Was that part of their decision? Okay, that's what it sounded like, that they wanted to be out.
No, the original legislation that was put forward was that the station could be acquired by either the town or the redevelopment authority. When it was originally presented to the redevelopment authority, it was one of time is of the essence, and we could possibly move faster than the town could in terms of going through to get funds. In hindsight, we might have not gone that way, but that's how it worked out. But it was either or, and it's still either or,
Well,
but
yeah.
at this point, the town would be doing the
It just
purchase.
seems like more, to be a landlord of a building that we're going to rent out seems more of a redevelopment authority thing than a town thing. It seems like more it should be in the hands of the redevelopment authority than the town, that's all I'm saying.
I think going forward, we've had some discussions amongst ourselves and the Board of Selectmen, is that it may very well be that it's a role as a management role, where redevelopment may be the manager of a town-owned piece of property. That's something that can happen. There are other possibilities, and it could be sold if there's an appropriate offer, as long as we have the control over it. The biggest thing is control. When we were trying to sell it before, flip it if you want to use that term, it's all about control. We want to make sure that it comes with 30 parking spaces, okay, and that's split up into 3 different lots. The 7 spaces behind, 20 on one, 23 on the other side, that we split into 2 lots, so we could have a connection to the post office if we were ever able to make that connection. So there's a lot of, sort of moving pieces that are a part of that. Other things that we've just kicked around is that perhaps the Friends of Stoughton Depot becomes a 501c3 not-for-profit, and that they could be the ones that would actually operate and manage the facility on behalf of the town. Certainly, I don't think the town necessarily wants to be a landlord, but then again, it could be a place for additional space for town hall staff. If you go back to 2 town managers, there was talk of perhaps the Visiting Nurses Association could be there. My ideal would be to have that be the retail kiosk for the post office, okay, and move the distribution facility somewhere else.
And by the way, if that building is sold, if the building is sold, it will have to be sold with a permanent historic restriction. It is now on the National Register. I believe it might be the only building in town. There's 2. Oh, yeah, the Clapp building and that building are the only 2 buildings in town on the National Historic Register. But if the building is sold, it would have to be sold with a permanent historic preservation easement. And the tenant, I take it, that you were negotiating with knew that and was still willing to go forward until the finances collapsed.
Okay, Mr. Ansvino?
I think you may have answered the first question. So this would be the same footprint you were looking at prior, when the redevelopment authority was looking to purchase?
Yes, it's the building and the 7th space is immediately behind it as one parcel. And then on the right-hand side, starting where the Stoughton Bakery is going back, there's 23 spaces there. We'd take the first 20 as one parcel that could go with the depot, and then the other 3, as I said, would be held by the town, okay, for a potential future connection into the post office parcel.
The second point, and I don't know if it's been revisited or not. I mean, at one point, and I know that the then governor didn't fund release the bond that was put forth to pay for half of this, to do the 175,000. Has that been pursued with our legislators? Is that all the
That 175,000 never materialized.
I know that didn't, because the governor at the time did not release it. It was in the bond, but it was never released.
It's gone.
And what I'm asking is, has that approach ever been revisited to go to our legislatures to see if they could get it in a bond to get the money and maybe have the present governor?
Actually,
I just didn't know if that had been looked at.
we personally did not. We were dealing with the Transit Realty Associates, who was the real estate arm of the MBTA. They went back to administration and finance, and they received NO.
All right. Is there a reason we need to rescind the 250 and then try and authorize the 350? Is there a difference between the two that you wouldn't just be looking for the extra 100?
What's the question? Why are we rescinding the 250 and then going for a new article for the 350?
Well,
as opposed
the difference between the two? I mean,
No, the issue of the way the 250 article was written, okay?
Oh, I see. I'm not the draftsman of the article. I will say that the difference between the two articles, if that's relevant, is that the first 250 was to be repaid if the building was flipped at a price that would allow the repayment, and this 250 is not to be repaid to the CPA funds, no matter what the outcome.
So that was part of the original article, that it would be repaid? All right, well, that would be a good reason to rescind that one and come back for the money again. And my last question is, since you're looking to purchase it, and we're looking at a total of $600,000 here, has there been any discussion amongst the people for, I'm sorry, 700, because they're going for 350, not 250. Has there been any discussion, or could anything be put forth now to indicate what you think the best use of this building would be if we're going to sink $700,000 into it? Because that, I mean, that's what you're asking for the town to spend out of the Preservation Committee's money, but...
I understand that. As I said, our intent, excuse me, is to rehab the exterior, but also to rehab the interior to the point of basically making it a habitable space for a tenant to move in and do their own tenant fit-up. I think that from the redevelopment's perspective, it would be the best use would probably be a commercial type of use that draws people into the downtown area. Now, whether that's a restaurant or a coffee shop or something like that, okay, would probably be its best and highest use. But there is a myriad of uses that are potential. As I said, it could be town hall space, annex for office space for town hall employees. It could be the retail kiosk for the post office. Two of the people that looked at it previously, when we had a request for proposal submitted, we're looking at it as a professional office building for both architect. One was looking at it from an architectural standpoint, another was looking at it from a real estate standpoint, having a real estate office in there. I think it's one of those where you sort of have to get into the arena and really figure out what that business plan can be. And until you know you're going to be able to do that, it's kind of difficult to say what is exactly the best and highest use. The first thing we would do in behalf of the Board of Selectmen is bring some historic preservation architects on board and have them come through. We would obviously ultimately be going through that RFQ process for an architect. that is, qualified from a historic preservation standpoint, and really listen and see what they have for suggestions. But I know that the real estate market is certainly 10 times hotter today than it was 2 years ago when we started this effort. There are people all over who are talking to us about they want to put a restaurant here, they want to do this, they want to do that. It has heated up dramatically.
And I mean, I agreed with your point. If you could get rid of the post office, it would be a nice place to keep
That would be,
you know,
from my
because
perspective,
it opens up a lot more.
It opens up a huge, asphalt area.
And part of the reason for asking is, I mean, this, obviously, the townspeople and businesses spent a lot of money to rehab the building, back when, and then, the state has just let it go into a total state of disrepair. And, they say, well, it's great, we got a train station right downtown, and guess what? The people who are using it from the town have no station to go to in the inclement weather, and, to me, it's just ridiculous when you have the building there, but
And that's
I just didn't know if any discussions had been.
No, and that's an entire possibility. There's still, interestingly, if you've been in it, inside there is a ticket booth area, okay, that's accessible from the outside. You could also wing off one end. It's probably 1,000 more square feet that the retail post office kiosk would need. They're only looking for 2,000, and it's a 3,200 square foot space. So it could very well be a 1,200 square foot waiting area. There's a woman in Easton who'd love to do, a bookstore and a cafe at the same time. She couldn't afford. Okay, she had VA funding behind her. She couldn't afford it. So if it goes out from that perspective, where the town has made the investment to both acquire and do that much renovation, makes it a lot more attractive to a lot of different people.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so something that you said piqued my interest. If the town agreed to do this, the redevelopment authority is kind of going to take it over and watch it and do...
We haven't had any definitive discussions on that. I'm just saying that the redevelopment authority is willing.
Is willing, okay.
Is very willing. We can serve as the owner's project manager through the procurement of architectural engineering services. It doesn't have to be an impact of additional work on town staff. These are things the redevelopment authority can handle. We can certainly oversee all of that construction work in town, so in the depot. So it's one of those things that we can do a lot, but we haven't had definitive discussions until we know that we come out of this situation. I can tell you that we'll have that discussion on November 19th if this does pass.
Mr. McCrisky?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've been spending all of our time just getting to this point tonight to ask for your support at the special town meeting. We've had some exciting conversations on the possibilities of the building, and I think for the first time that I've seen in recent years, a very, very, very good working relationship with the Redevelopment Authority, CPC, and diverse ideas coming together to get us to this point. There's so much we can do with the building, but the first step is here, is your support moving forward to town meeting. John, the 501(c)(3) idea has been discussed briefly. Just the structure where it is with the downtown renovations really gives us a lot of pull if we get into some major renovations that are needed, just to have that access, to have that corner. Town offices have been discussed. We have people now that are sharing offices as well. If we could free up space, maybe that's an opportunity. Maybe a small meeting place where civic groups could meet there as well. The ticket sales and a coffee shop, and as you mentioned as well, for the residents to have a place to go in when they take the train. So these have all been discussed. We look forward to the relationship. Some of the expertise that the Redevelopment Authority brings is going to be an asset to the Board of Selectmen moving forward. I think it's going to be a very good relationship. Dwight McCarran, president of the Historical Society, is here as well, and there's opportunities there that maybe just using a room for some small exhibits as well. So, I mean, we've got all these ideas, but we've got to get the building in our possession, get it cleaned up. There was actually a piece of some of the molding that had fallen off. We need to be on top of that, protect the building as we meet and decide how we're going to move forward. So I think I safely can act on behalf of the members on the Board of Selectmen and ask for your strong consideration in favor of the article.
Okay.
I would like to
Mr.
say that, if I may, this is the CPC portion of the hearing, and I just would like to say that the CPC's role here was to hear these arguments and vote yea or nay to recommend. We have given you the reasons, and I would like to adjourn the CPC's portion of this hearing and reconvene in our meeting unless there are other questions directed to the CPC about its role.
Okay, so I have a list of people who have questions, and some of you might have questions more about the acquisition of the actual building as opposed to the CPC. So who has questions that the CPC needs to answer? Okay. All right, so wait a minute, we're going to take our little list and re-amend it. So hold on 1 second while he checks. So then after they leave, I believe that Mr. Lindwall will remain to answer questions that are related more to building kind of stuff. Okay. Okay. Okay, so who's next? Okay, so we'll go with Mr. Mitchell first. This is a CPC question, correct?
Yeah, well, most of my questions are not, but
Then you can come back to the next one. Okay.
Has the CPC voted on this yet, or discussed it?
What was the last part of your question?
Have they voted on this?
Yes,
Affirmative.
we voted in June to recommend approving the funding. Our role is a funding role, and we look at a project to see if it meets the criteria for CPA funding. So in June, the committee, I believe John indicated was a unanimous vote, voted to approve the funding request.
Okay, that's all I want to know from you people, so.
Okay, Peter?
I have a number of questions, although I won't bore you with them. My only concern with this particular project is you have many noble projects ongoing and a lot of undertakings as we currently sit. So I wonder if you do pursue this, you're going to purchase this building and hand it over to somebody else to decide what to do with it and also how to run it? Is that what I'm hearing? I'm directing that to your committee first because you are recommending to purchase this building. So I'm curious, you have a lot of undertakings right now as we speak. I can name many, Glen Echo and so forth, I won't go on. If the town purchases this building by CPC, your intention is to hand it to someone to oversee the reconstruction? The MBTA obviously hasn't used it for years. What is your intention?
Okay. So if I may, if I understood your question correctly, it's with the other projects that the CPC has ongoing, what would our role be in terms of either oversight or otherwise with this project? And I think our role would be minimal at best. Once town meeting were to vote, if they were to vote to approve the funding, yes, there are some administrative responsibilities that we have in terms of a grant agreement and things of that nature in order to comply with the Community Preservation Act, the requirements under the Act. Once that is done and the funding is in place, and Mike Barrett could speak to this aspect of it much better than I could, there's ongoing oversight, but more from an administrative standpoint, once again, to ensure compliance with the requirements under the Act. In terms of what's going to go on with the building, and I think you even used the term project manager, we would not have a role in that. That would be up to either the Board of Selectmen and/or the Redevelopment Authority.
Will you indulge me for a moment?
I think John wanted to ask.
Well, let me address you. I'm not an attorney, as you obviously may know. But my question is relevant to the fact that you have several projects pending. You have nobody, from what I can understand, that's overseeing these implementations of these projects, and you're asking tonight before us to purchase on behalf of the town of Stoughton, another project, and you're telling me, or you're at least saying something to the fact that then you'd hand it back over to the Board of Selectmen or to whoever's purview it would now fall under. So am I confused, or am I understanding that wrong?
I'm not sure if you're confused.
I may be.
I would just respond this way. In terms of the other projects that we have, as you and everyone here may know, the CPC is made up of certain representatives from different committees in the town. I'm the Housing Authority's representative to the CPC. John is the Conservation Commission's representative, et cetera, et cetera. We assign within our committee a representative from the committee to oversee, again, the administrative aspects of the project, CPA compliance aspects of the project. So if it were a housing matter, it would be assigned to me. If it were an open space matter, it would be assigned most likely to John or to John Linehan. So I don't think there's any aspect of either this project, if it were to be approved, or the projects that we have already approved that somehow are going to tax the resources of the CPC. Again, in terms of what the town is going to do with the building, that's an entirely separate discussion, and it's not really a discussion that we have a role in.
Well, frankly, I'm not worried about taxing your time. I'm sure that you're in this for a reason, and I applaud your efforts. I'm concerned about getting another project and letting it sit by or not get addressed, similar to some of the projects you currently have. For example, I use Glen Echo. So that's my question. That's all I'm asking. I'm not asking to go back and forth with legal talk and bylaws and things of this nature or according to this. I'm just asking you a simple question. If this property is purchased, because it's been vacant for quite a while, I don't know how many other people have offered to purchase it for some other reason. You're actually talking about selling tickets for a train station. MBTA doesn't use it for that purpose. I'm just curious, what happens once you take possession or we approve? Not you personally or the CPC, the town of Stoughton. Who is going to follow through on that? That's my last, that's the question I want to answer.
And I just want to say, save that question, because after CPC leaves, we're gonna delve into that question, okay? All right, so the last person that I have on my list who wants to ask CPC a question is Ed.
Yeah, we're buying only like 30 spaces of that parking lot. Is there any discussion about the rest of the spaces, or who owns that, the T, or what's the thought on that? Because what good is 30 spaces on the side and the middle is owned by somebody else?
Okay, and Ed, that's going to be a question for after they leave, okay?
I'll ask a different question.
Okay.
Why do you want to bond the 350 when we only have to pay $35,000 a year for 10 years? Why don't we just pay cash for it for 10 years?
What's that?
Why do we want to bond the
It's the 10-year mortgage.
Yeah, but the state's giving you the
Wait,
mortgage. It doesn't matter.
There's an answer to that question. The state is allowing us to pay for this building at the rate of $35,000 a year for 10 years at no interest. So how can you say no to that? And therefore, the CPA funds will be dispersed at the rate of $35,000 a year for 10 years. And that's equivalent to a bond. We do not have to come up with $350,000 up front. And there is a question, it's a legal question, that we have presented to town council as to whether that's actually a bonding issue or whether it's simply a current allocation of funds. If it's a current allocation of funds, it will only require a majority vote. If it's a bonding issue, it will require 2/3 vote. That issue has to be resolved before town meeting. But the reason we're paying for it over 10 years is that we're getting an interest-free $35,000.
Well, that's fine, but you wouldn't need a bond to do that. Every year, CPC gets funded by taxes, you pay $35 a year and bang, it's done. So, because I'm more concerned about our bonding authority for the whole town. If we pass the high school and the public service building and all this stuff, we're gonna run pretty close to our total town borrowing limit. And every project you guys wanna do, you wanna bond everything. So just need to keep that in mind when we go forward.
Okay, now these are just questions for the CPC, not about what we're going to do with the building or anything else, right? Because we're going to get to that after they leave. Okay. Mr. Mullen, this is just for the CPC. 'Cause after they leave, we can have all that fun talk.
Bob Mullen, Precinct 2, question to the CPC. Now, why would the CPC want to buy the building and turn it over to the redevelopment authority? Why not just cut to the chase, let the redevelopment authority just buy it? Because it is our tax money that the CPC would be using, or bonding money. So, I mean, I would just say, if we're going to buy it, we keep it. We don't give, redevelopment has their own funding, and it's a separate entity. They should have bought it in the first place. So, I'm not comfortable with this type of deal going on back and forth.
That's a good question. I can answer it very directly. The CPC can't buy anything. We don't have any money. All we can do is recommend to town meeting that they buy it, and then you have to find an entity to buy it. The entity cannot be CPC. It could be the redevelopment authority, it could be the town.
You're saying the town of Stoughton couldn't hang on to it?
There is.
No, I'm not saying the CPC, but you buy it for the town. Yeah, the town, that's right.
The proposal is not to turn it over to the SRA.
Right.
The proposal is for the town of Stoughton, at the request of the Board of Selectmen, to acquire the train station. SRA is a willing partner who has expressed an interest and willingness to do whatever the town needs to further the use of that down the road.
Right. Well, I mean, then it gets back to the chase where, why not the redevelopment just buy it like they were going to buy it in the first place and let us save our money for some other project? $700,000. Let me just ask the question first. $700,000 is a lot of money. It's still our tax money. It's on our tax bill.
Never going to buy the building first. The Board of Selectmen came to the SRA and asked if we could facilitate the acquisition of the building under the deal that had worked out with the state legislature that Mr. Manzavino referred to earlier.
Right.
We were not able to complete
That was on the prior governmental administration, right? Right. And the question was asked, all right. Well, I understand it's not on the agenda. But I thought, well, I mean, I thought at some point in time they were going to buy it and you know, what's the term? You know, just swap it to somebody else. But, you know.
We tried to facilitate the acquisition on behalf of the Board of Selectmen, which would have worked if we could have found somebody to do that. Deal that.
Right.
Deal on the table now is for the town to acquire the train station. SRA is the partner.
Well, let me ask to the CPC. This is already on the historic national landmark, right? So whoever buys this, if the town doesn't buy it, whoever buys it still has to be under the constraints of the National Historic Register, right? So they just can't change the facade of the building or anything.
There are certain restrictions, but they can pretty much they can adapt it to a particular use, but there are some restrictions on the facade and the appearance. That's correct. I do want to answer your direct question.
Sure, go ahead.
You ask, why doesn't the CPC just buy it and then sell it? We can't do that. We don't have the authority to own property. The only authority we have under the statute is to make a recommendation, yay or nay, to town meeting. Then town meeting has to vote for the town or someone else to buy it. Now, that entity would be either the Stoughton Redevelopment Authority, the natural buyer would be the Stoughton Redevelopment Authority, or the Board of Selectmen representing the town. It could be bought by the Conservation Commission if it were a conservation property, but it's not. So there's only two choices, the Stoughton Redevelopment Authority or the Board of Selectmen. And the Stoughton Redevelopment Authority's attempt to buy it collapsed, and they have not expressed an interest in going forward at the full purchase price. And so based on those facts, the CPC decided that it was vital to the restoration of the center that that building be acquired, because it plays such an important role in the history of Stoughton. And we therefore voted unanimously to fund the purchase.
Can I say one thing? And you mentioned that it's on the National Historic Register. I just got a communication from the Mass Historical Commission, and they're making it clear there's the possibility to get matching grants. Not huge amounts, but if in the future the CPC were to put out, let's say, $50,000 or $100,000, the Mass Historical Commission might match that, more toward planning of how to use the building rather than straight repairs. But there's one way, at least, from the fact that it's on the National Historic Register, might help us if we can spin it in a historical direction. It's a big if, but it's a possibility.
Just for the record, I mean, I don't have a problem buying the building, but I wouldn't want to put money into $350,000 into renovating. I think we somehow get some fundraising going or something, or get to something, you know, some other group or the state. The MBTA probably wants to get rid of it. I assume they're willing to give it to us.
I think that's a great idea. I hope you will lead the fundraising effort. Somebody has to do it.
All right, well, thank you.
Mr. Hanson? No, wait a minute, sorry, wrong one.
You're Elliot.
Yeah.
I guess we're going to have to use initials or something. Couple of points, and
And this is just for the CPC, not about
it
the
is for the
building.
CPC.
Okay.
And as you're explaining some of this, you probably have a question that in the legal advertising for this proceeding, I take it you're really continuing something, a project that started earlier, and I'm just trying to make sure that the normal legal notice that we have to put in, which usually precedes the project planning thing in November, is really, does not, I'm in my doubts whether it applies to this, but when you're in doubt, I think we should check with counsel on that. I'm interpreting it, you've already been in a project, already considered this project a couple of years ago, and I'm even looking in the same vein as you were working with the Swan Tavern a year ago, so that I don't think you need to have that other, but that's my personal opinion, as you've described it. And the other part is, I remember very vividly working with the Friends of the Railroad Station, or whatever it was, I forgot now, over 20 years ago. And we did privately fundraise $250,000 to restore that building. And I was really miffed that that group was a 501c3 group, and they just chose to disband, mainly because it was down to a few people who were about ready to disband themselves from the earth. But if we get a group that works with it and take responsibility and make sure that it goes along, because it is a part of the town.
If there are no other questions, I'd like to declare this portion of the meeting, the CPC portion, closed, and the committee reconvene in the Utanus room.
Okay. Thank you for helping us.
Thank you, John.
All right, now we'll get to ask people the rest of our questions, like, should we even be buying it? Okay.
Cynthia has a question.
Was this for CPC? Because I just kind of let them go. Cynthia? Okay, well, we'll get back. All right. All right, let's start. I don't know who's going to answer these, but whoever wants to answer them can. Joe, you're up.
I'm sorry.
Hi, Joe.
Joe Madden. Joe Madden. We're going to do Joe Madden first. You're on my list. Oh, no, I'm all set. You're all set. Okay, Elliot, you're next. Go for it.
Just a couple minor things. I'll try to be succinct in the late view of the late hour. One simple thing is we seem to have drifted from Article 8 to Article 9, rightfully so, without opening the hearing on that. But the things that wonder is part of the funding of...
We actually took a vote to hear them all at once.
Yeah, we're going to hear them all at
8,
once.
9, and 10, we took a vote to hear them all at once at the beginning. I just want to clarify that we did take a vote to do that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Things that, on the paying for this, it seems to me, before we had an issue when we were going to buy the station, that some of the revenue from the parking would belong to the town. And that's something that I think should be addressed. I don't know how the hell that can be addressed as to, or the MBTA is going to share the revenue from the parking. I mean, the town does maintain it, they shovel it, they plow it, whatever they do, but they don't seem to, I don't know if they're getting any money for that. And the other thing is, what happens when the South Coast Rail, if it ever materializes? What's going to happen to the building?
Okay, so the first question is we're getting the parking, so are we going to be able to charge those train people? And the second question is, what happens when South Coast?
There is, excuse me, there is a clause in the documents, excuse me, that the owner, the town, if you will, would not charge for commuter parking. They would not compete with the MBTA. That doesn't mean that the town couldn't put meters in with a 2-hour limit or do something, but as far as having a daily rate for commuters to use, that would be a non-compete clause. So you would not be able to do it, but you're going to own those parking spaces outright. So they do have significant value, you know, going forward.
Wait, was that in the original agreement?
I'm sorry?
Was that in the original agreement, or this is a new agreement?
That has been in the agreement since.
Because we were told when we voted for this at the original town meeting that we were going to get money and it was going to pretty much pay for itself.
That was good. That was based on a rental of the building, not on the parking spaces.
No, we were told, we were specifically told parking, but whatever.
So if I'm getting what you're saying, and I might have misunderstood earlier, is that the poor commuters are going to lose a whole bunch of spaces that they're normally parking in right now?
Yes, they're going to lose 30 spaces that they have at the present time, yes. They will be, obviously, there's an issue of putting signage out there to make sure that those people who are commuting now, wherever they park, you know, those spaces are not available to them. That's why in this particular case, meters with 2-hour signs and enforcement may very well make sense, okay, to collect a little bit of revenue, but also to make sure that you get a turnover for the businesses. And the second part of your question, I apologize. Oh, South Coast Rail, sorry. Thank you. It's late. As I understand it, excuse me, if South Coast Rail goes to a second rail, it's going to be on the far side of the existing track. It is not going to be on the same side as the depot building is now. So there would be no impact whatsoever on the building or the parking spaces behind it from a permanent standpoint. Obviously, there's going to be excuse me, operational interruptions during construction, as there always is, but from what I can see on their plans, that wouldn't be a problem. However, the town is also seeking to have the rail depressed coming through the center of town, which means there would be a very massive retaining wall built alongside of the building. I can tell you that I've been inside it when the trains go by. It's as solid a building as you're going to find. It's granite stone. It does not move. There's a little bit of vibration in the floor, but it doesn't move when the trains go by. So I don't see any impact on that building from South Coast Rail other than disruption during construction, which is normal whichever way they go, surface or depressed.
Okay. You did have a question, Jeff. Okay, go ahead, because you were on my list.
And it was mentioned a couple of times, reflipping this building. I seem to me, I've missed the point totally now. What we're trying to do is, the possibility is we go in, we purchase the property from the transit, we clean it up, we make it presentable, and we put it back on the market to a private.
Yes, it can be, it could be municipal office space, but it could very well be a rental. You'd go through a request for proposals.
A rental or resale, though?
Or that's something that the Board of Selectmen and the town would have to decide if they choose to do something like that. I don't think that's necessarily on the horizon, but let me go back to the flipping a little bit. What the redevelopment authority did was we issued a request for a proposal for a 10-year lease purchase. And we did that on the basis of the 10-year mortgage, the $35,000 a year. And it made sense to a potential developer, except for one thing. So that was the flipping part. It would be a 10-year lease purchase, except that the developer found out that in order to get historic tax credits on his side of the ledger to save money, he needed to own it in fee. So what we did was we accelerated that process and revised it, if you will, from a 10-year lease purchase to a straight purchase. So it was going to be a flip on our part, the redevelopment authority's part, that a private owner was going to buy it. And that was where the term flip comes from. That isn't really what we're talking about here tonight, okay? That was in the past, and it did not work out.
Okay, John. Oh, sorry, Joe, you had one more question? Okay. Go ahead, John.
I guess I don't have a question. But I think I'm strongly in favor of this, as I was for Echo Lake. I think the idea is to have control over these crucial properties and to have control over what happens to them and what doesn't happen to them. And, this is such a central piece of property and a beautiful building that, the town has an opportunity to control that for whenever, in perpetuity. And we'll lose that opportunity come December 31st, so.
Which is why the redevelopment authority has made its commitment to the Board of Selectmen to do whatever it takes to repurpose that building. Perhaps that's the better word, to repurpose it as far as what goes on inside of that building every day. That's why we've done, what we've done.
And with that, John, is that, let it be clear that this will be in control of the town of Stoughton, the taxpayers of town of Stoughton, through the Board of Selectmen, working with the redevelopment authority. The members of the redevelopment authority have some talents that the members of the Board of Selectmen don't. Forrest has been a wealth of information for us, and some other projects he's been involved with in other parts of the state. But if we do something and it's rental, it's going to go through any other process and go through a vetting procedure to make sure it's in the best interest. I mean, because we can use it for other uses here, even though a community meeting space. I mean, there's just so much that we can do, but we can't even begin the process of what we're going to do with it until we own it. The CPC was good enough to grant the funding, which is our funding source. That's where the money's coming for us to buy this building. And then we'll begin the process. And it's not going to sit in abeyance. It's not going to sit there with the windows all boarded up. When we get possession of this, we'll begin the process, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, to go either through a nonprofit, for instance, with the State Theater, the same thing. CPC funded portions of the State Theater that's under a private 501(c)(3). The train station can do the same thing. When they got on the Register of National Places, there was actually a nonprofit group that was started then, and they did a lot of the renovations that got on the National Register. There's a lot we can do, but we can't do anything until we get approval of the Finance Committee to support it at town meeting, and then the town meeting vote. And it'll go through the same process you've seen with some of the downtown renovations. We're going to look at a visioning process to see what people would like to see that building used for. Because the more ideas, as we found in the downtown and some of the zoning issues, is that more public input we can get, it's going to stir the thought process. But we can't do anything until we control that building. Right now, it could be used, in other areas, historic buildings have had neon in the window that says open and flashing. And, I've seen an old train station that has a tattoo parlor in it. We can maintain the integrity, and for what it stands for in history, going to the 1800s, and preserve that building and make it something that we can be proud of. And it will fit right into downtown renovation. There has also been phone calls made to Congressman Lynch's office as well about funding options. As you heard Dwight McCarron, with the Mass Historical Commission, there's a lot we can do because there's not a lot of buildings like this left. But again, we can't start the process until we clear this hurdle.
And hopefully I'm anticipating someone's question. The closing of this in terms of acquiring it from the MBTA requires this gentleman to show up with a $35,000 check. All the documents are in place. They've been signed by the MBTA. The plan that needs to be filed in the registry has been stamped in Mylar form and been approved by the MBTA. So as soon as we can, in fact, have a $35,000 check issued, if it is approved by town meeting, that closing can happen. It's fully vetted. We're not waiting a year to take it over or whatever.
Okay, Christine, you're done? Okay. Steve Mitchell.
I was one of those people that wanted to put the train underground to begin with, but I don't think you're saying that that's what would like to do necessarily is going to make that happen. I think there's a pretty good chance that we're going to have electric towers going through the center. Now, I hope I'm wrong, because I don't want to see that, but for you to tell it that that's what's going to happen, I think that's a stretch. I myself, along with a couple other people in this room, believe the redevelopment authority should have people that step up. They want to redevelop the center. Why don't they start with the train station? It would seem to me that would make perfect sense, to take the building that is the most historic in the whole town and have the redevelopment authority step up and do it. And I have one person over here arguing that they don't ever want to get involved with it as far as buying it. I don't understand that whatsoever. And then I hear people say, well, we're gonna put new bathrooms in, we're gonna put new floors in, we're gonna keep the old boiler, which is a giant mistake. You gotta fix the outside first before you do anything on the inside. You gotta make sure the windows are all right. You're gonna make sure that the roof is all right. There's not birds living in it. You know, I've heard this before. Let's get heat in a building that's fallen down. We gotta look, and if we're gonna spend all this money, we gotta get people in charge of this to know what they're doing, because to put a bathroom and a heating system, especially an old one that's not gonna run too good, in a building that's nobody's gonna watch, it's gonna freeze up. You gotta have better plans than you got here.
Let me respond to that. We had a very thorough inspection done of the building. The plans as far as the rehabilitation start right on the top, replacing all of the copper flashing, replacing the pieces of slate roof that have dislodged, basically replacing all of the windows with what will satisfy Mass Historic. Ultimately, the plans that are developed do need to be approved by Mass Historic Commission. That's a part of the historic covenant that comes with the property. We will need to address the ADA compliance from access exterior to the interior. Inside, the walls and the ceiling are fine. The bathrooms are not. They're not ADA compliant, and they're separate. There's a ladies' room on one side and a men's room on another, and that's an 1888 reason that I can't explain. They need to be redone. The heating system, the boiler is relatively new and is in very, very good shape. What the problem is that the radiators...
Somebody's going to rent a building. They're going to want air conditioning, and they're not going to want...
No, we understand, there's mechanicals too. But it starts from the top.
Heating system that
Starts
works.
from the top and it comes down, okay, and then we work to the inside, okay?
And the Historical Society is not going to say that those radiators are standard with the building. I'm sure that building was heated with coal or oil originally, pot-belly stoves or whatever.
It's a natural...
Those don't need to be there.
It's a natural gas-fed boiler that was replaced about 10 years ago, and the old tanks that were there from original fuel oil have been removed. It's got a clean bill of health as far as the basement is concerned. There's no 21E issues as far as the building is concerned. And we know exactly where we have to go, but you have to go through the process of retaining, if you will, engaging an historic preservation architect, okay, for plans and
I've been working with
specifications.
heating systems all my life. If you're going to put an old heating steam system back working, and then the building's not going to be occupied, then the hell's going to fall in, because the boilers have to be maintained, and they have a lot of problems. And you're gonna put old radiators in on new floors, they're probably gonna leak. So I think you need to look into what you're doing there.
Yep, I understand that. We were thinking
Putting in-
basically of wall-mounted radiators.
I could see maybe roughing in bathrooms, and then when somebody, you finally get somebody that wants to go in there, then finish the job. But
Steve,
just put a lot of money into a building and leave it possibly vacant to freeze up, I've seen it all the time, is not a good idea.
Steve, you're 100% right on every point you brought up. But again, we can't even get to that point until we get this board's support and get a vote of town meeting. Right now, the building's sitting. Nobody's addressing it. Any issues that we don't know about are getting worse because we don't have the access. We don't have, it's not our control to go in and take care of it. Briefly, because you brought it up, I looked into it, and there are radiators that are newer radiators that have the look of antique, so we can keep the look. That's what we're looking to do. But again, it's like talking about a car and how you're going to drive it until you find a way to buy the car. And let's not even talk about what it's going to operate on the highway until we own it. So again, we just keep coming back to, we can't do anything, and your ideas are right, you're correct, but we can't get to that until we get past the process.
Other members are talking about you're gonna start a project. We had a couple other places looking at the starting project, and they don't get done.
Well, Steve, let's talk
concerned
about moving
this.
forward instead of talking about the problems that might have taken place in the past. I mean, this is a new
Really,
venture.
I
It's a-
really think the redevelopment authority is the people to do this building.
Well, that's why I'm sitting here beside the redevelopment authority, Steve. This is what we've envisioned this, is a joint partnership with the redevelopment authority. And if you've noticed, Forrest is taking the lead on this because he knows more about the process. The redevelopment authority has agreed in full, in writing, and the Board of Selectmen back with them, that this is a joint partnership. That's why we're here tonight together. But
I
again,
just don't feel warm and fuzzy about this. You come in here asking for $350,000 with no plan as to what you're gonna do with that money.
We're going to move on now, okay? We're going to move on now. All right.
Wait
No.
a minute.
Wait, no, I mean not from the project, just from that little part. We're going to go on to Peter now.
I respectfully understand what's trying to go on here, but I really, really think that the powers to be need to get out there and talk to some of the people that I'm talking with. And it's not all apples and oranges out there. Not everybody is feeling this particular growth in terms of just townwide. We have an economic development officer here, or coordinator. Why aren't we attracting business and private? I hear all these great ideas about putting in that building. I support the building. I don't want to lose the building. But we can't continue to ask people to continue to grow government and not have some private or, I don't know, vendors and contractors and businesses come here and develop with us. I understand there's plenty of reasons why we should and why we can explore all these great opportunities. I understand that, and I respect that. I truly do. But I think about these things realistically, and I think about it when it's coming out of my pocket, not just the town's budget and whatnot. And I really wonder, because they're great ideas. I really do. But when is enough enough? I mean, when do we go outside of the government instead of growing it a little bit? And I don't mean the government nationally. I mean here, local, municipality. Why ain't we? I haven't heard of a second project created by this new economic. If you can share with me tonight that there's a second project other than the one that's being credited, and it slips my mind right now, but I need to hear some other ideas other than just the town buying everything.
okay, well, Peter, I think and I agree with you, but like you, I put my name on a ballot, like the other members of the Board of Selectmen, to represent the residents as well. And we hear from a lot of those residents, and a lot of times, it's not kind. Okay, so I mean, we get the full brunt of it. But again, leadership, and this is where it comes down to leadership, is if we're going to serve on a board or commission, the Redevelopment Authority and the Board of Selectmen, we need to say that this is for the good of the town as a whole. This building, and us having control of it, is going to allow us to maintain the history that's important to our town, show the commitment to the downtown, because we are going to be a stakeholder in any redevelopment. There's nothing more, and I would challenge you or any member of this board or any other board in town to go out and talk to the private developers. And the first thing they want to see is the town's commitment to doing this. It's great to come to a millionaire and say, I want your money, but the first thing they're going to ask you for is, what have you done? Show me you're taking it serious.
And it goes back when I was in 1992, started a downtown renovation with just some simple park benches and trees and flowers. It was considered dumb. But then again, it was used in a subsequent grant that we had taken initiative. That's what we have to do here. That's why this is such a bold step, because you're not going to get a developer to come in, and we're going to need a developer to come in and invest in downtown, to take the buildings down, to put new buildings up, and they're going to want to know what the commitment of the town is. And if we take a back seat in this right now, it doesn't matter how many paid employees we have, it's a commitment of the taxpayers through their elected boards, through their Board of Selectmen, their redevelopment authority, CPC, town meeting, finance committee. It's our town, Peter. And if we don't take a stand right now and show the private development and the funding sources for grants, we're not going to get to the steps that you want to see. And I agree with you 100%. That's why we're taking these steps.
And just for a moment, I'm not going to trade back and forth. It really is late, but I'm not really even talking about a ballot or representing or leading. I sit here because I'm trying to make a difference.
Like we all are.
Correct. So, my thought is, again, I buy into the concept. I truly do. It's just there is a point where of no return. And I continue to see these projects. We have a huge ideas with schools and public safety buildings and all sorts of things on the horizon. And now we're asking $700,000 here. And I think I do my part every time the Board of Selectmen or the Assessor's Office or the Water Commissioners raise the rates, and I'm there paying them like without any issue. So I do my, as well as you and everyone else that does that. But there comes a point where when is enough enough? And that I'll end on that, and I thank you for your time.
Okay. Ed?
Two questions on the deal. I mean, in my opinion, the CPC, this is what it's for, is for the railroad station projects like this, historical structures. You know, playgrounds are nice, but...
I mean, essentially, all the money that's being used is coming from the state. It's coming from the Commonwealth. And if we don't use it, another town's going to use it, so...
That's right. Well, and that's a question also. No one really knows what percentage they're going to keep funding the match, but whatever. The parking lot, the rest of it, what's the story with that? Does the T own it? Do you have an option to buy it or use it, or?
Excuse me, the remaining spaces stay as long as the station stays where it is. We have been told by the T that if the station does get relocated, whether it's to the police station here or further south somewhere, it's going to move as a part of South Coast Rail. Those parking spaces, that land, would become excess land, and they would offer that to the town.
Okay, and if you find a tenant to go in there, who's going to get the lease money? Since the town owns the building, would the town get it? Would it
go to the general fund? It'll go to the general fund.
It'll go to general fund?
Yeah, unless we set up a revolving account or something like that, but it's not even been discussed, but it would go to the general fund.
Okay, and after the big discussion last night with the Cape and Rent, the whole thing about that, not having an architect and a project manager and blah, blah, blah. This is much bigger dollars, much bigger project. Are those things worked out, of all the specs, getting to someone to do the work?
That's what the redevelopment authority is offering to the Board of Selectmen. We are able to go through the procurement process in accordance with Commonwealth of Massachusetts general regulations, but we're able to do it a lot faster than town staff is, and we can offer that and then bring that. The first thing I would do is we would put out a request for qualifications for historic preservation architect. And we've been talking to BK Architects in Brockton, who's done a lot of work over at what was the original Thomas Edison generating station in Brockton, where the old Colony Planning Council offices are. And they're ready to come over here right away, but we have to go through that process of selecting in accordance with Mass General laws. That's something that Redevelopment Authority can offer, we can do, we've done it before.
Okay, maybe you know this, maybe you don't. The other piece of the parking lot that's on the other side of the tracks where that building is, does T still own that? Does anybody own that, or do you know what's going on with that?
Which property are you talking about, sir?
Railroad Ave?
The one on Canton Street, that little triangle piece that goes almost comes up to the tracks. It might be 10 spaces in there or something.
That's private ownership.
That is private ownership.
Yeah, on the other side of where the Canton Street meets Porter Street, yeah, that's private ownership.
Okay.
They blacked out all the numbers on those spaces.
Okay, Ms. Stansfield?
Yeah, and I want to reiterate, and the reason I say you really need to move forward with
something solid on what you really think you want to use. You may say you can't do anything till you own it, but I can tell you when we were dealing with trying to get the train station and get money for it, and speaking to our state senator, saying, why won't the state donate this to the town? Because you let it go into disrepair after the town repaired it. Here's the response I got. We gave you the armory, what did you do with that? And that's what people are gonna think about. So that's why I just suggest you have something solid. Now you can't commit to that this is what you're gonna do, but you gotta have some solid ideas to sell to people that this isn't gonna be another building that the town acquires and then it's gonna sit and get nothing done and we end up with another albatross around our neck.
You're right, John. What I would say to them if they ask that is say, well, in the deed you said, you know, it was agreed you had to offer it to us for $1, we took it. And that's what I would say to them has happened with the Armory. We took it with no plans for it. Unlike the train station, that the plans are really limited by our own imagination as to what we can do with it and how we mold it into downtown renovations and revitalization. The Armory didn't fit into that type of plan at the time. I agree with you. I mean, the Armory, it's a piece of property we got back, and it did fall into total disrepair.
We let it go.
Exactly, exactly. But this is totally different. I mean, we've talked about the train station from the first time that downtown revitalization was talked about, is, you know, some of the uses for it. So I don't think it fits into that, but I agree. We've got to come up with some plans.
Just a point that you really got to be able to address that, because there are people with long memories, so.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree with you.
But I'd also like to say that, you know, it's kind of a new day in terms of the relationship between Redevelopment Authority and the Board of Selectmen. Redevelopment Authority came to the Board of Selectmen and suggested that we'd be willing to pony up $10,000 if the town would match it to come up with the flashing beacons that you see in the center of town. We went through that procurement process on the town side. It took a little bit longer in terms of the town's money, but we got 3 of them. One has been installed. Actually works. If you do it, cars stop. So we've begun to know how to work with one another, okay? It's not going to sit there, okay? Trust me. From my perspective, it's not going to sit there. It's going to get done, okay? It is a key piece to the entire redevelopment plan of downtown, from the master plan all the way down to Redevelopment Authority. But we now know how to work together and getting stuff done. And going back a little bit to Peter, if I may, I spent, you know, the prior 2 hours of coming upstairs working with the Economic Development Coordinator in a meeting known as the Friends of Stoughton Center. There's 120 people, I think you're a member of it also, who have come together and said, it's time to really start working on Stoughton Center. She started this like 5-6 months ago, and she's got 100 people working for her already. We got hanging brackets hung on a half a dozen light poles. We've got some, you know, some planters up there, and the poles are decorated. I water the plants on the clock island, and where people used to scream at you and blow your horn if you cross the street are saying thank you. So it's a new day. At least I hope it is.
Mr. Recupero? Yes.
Sure.
Yes, yeah, you're next, but as a matter of fact, you are next. No, I did my committee, and then we got it. You're there, trust me.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Just a couple points. First of all, and I think this is a critical point of funding, is that the CPC assessment and what we're paying for it actually out of our pockets each day is unchanged regardless, because the funding mechanism of the CPC doesn't add this additional spending. So I guess the question is this a test of whether we want it or whether we don't want it? And without discussing what we're going to do with it as a policy matter, I would say for my own part, if it's the Redevelopment Authority, fine, they're in the economic development business. I'm all for that. If it's the town, then the town has some policy decisions to make, and we certainly do need to make those. But if there's if there's 3 purposes to CPC funding and spending, if there's one single building in the entire town that we should spend it on, it's this one. And I would say I really don't see another in my own mind that I would vote to spend it on. But in terms of what it's going to cost us out of our pockets, the assessment's the same anyway, so I would suggest to you that if this is a valuable piece to the town, and it is, we put it on our postcards, we put it on the front page of our town meeting warrant, we put it on our, we market our town around this, we actually owe it to our community, I think, to spend it for one of the three purposes for which CPC spending and funding is intended for. So I think the details of it, we should have actually a discussion real soon, because as soon as the town does take title to this property, the charter actually dictates what happens to it. So all these ideas are actually just folly, because we need to get down to brass tacks about who actually decides and what they're going to decide. Myself, I like the idea of the redevelopment authority, but it's a broader discussion for a different day. Thank you.
Okay, so we have 2 more people on the list, 3 more people on the list, and then we're done. So nobody else raise your hand, okay? So Ms. Walsh, you are next.
Well, this is an advertised public hearing.
I know.
I am a member of the public. I wish to be heard.
I'm calling on you now.
I'm putting the people down the list. A lot of people raise their hands.
I'm trying to reduce
see
the
the
hot
list.
air in the building. I have a question on Article 10. Is the wording adequate? A couple of people have alluded to the fact that some of the projects haven't gone forward. And if you watched or you attended last night's selectmen's meeting, the wording of previous articles didn't allow us to hire someone to come up with the specs. You don't go through the procurement process with something written on the back of a napkin. You have to have specifications. And it can't be 3 people at McDonald's over coffee writing it all out. It has to be professionals. The days of Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland, let's build a barn, those days are gone. This is Massachusetts. It's not Amish country. It has to be done by professionals. I don't know if this wording is adequate, that will allow for someone to come up with the specs so that they can go out to bid to rehab the railroad station. And another thing I've heard, and if you were listening closely last night, town forces don't have the time to do this. I think I can quote the town manager from last night. If it was 1 or 2 hours a week, that would be possible. But if it's going to be hours and hours and days, it isn't. Everyone means well. And in the olden days, yes, volunteers did a lot of this stuff, but those days are gone.
Okay, wait a minute, don't go. So you want me to check the wording on the article to make sure that it's adequate, that we can hire somebody to oversee it? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, I don't know. In fact, this was a question that was asked of Mr. Morton last night by someone on the Board of Selectmen. Can they even use CPC money for that purpose?
Okay, I'm planning before this goes to town meeting to make sure that all of these recommendations go to bond council and to the thing. So it's already done. Okay, and it's already done to town council. Okay.
And can I respond to the issue of town forces? When we did our original request for proposal for the 10-year lease purchase, we prepared the RFP. We advertised it with Maureen Doherty's help. She put it on Compass. I have an account with the Central Register. We published it in the Central Register. I would say it took Maureen Doherty no more than a half an hour to assist us in that total process. I do this all the time. It's what I've done for the last 45 years. A request for qualifications from an architect. I've got 10 of them in my file at home. It's not a problem. We do it professionally. We know what we're doing on that.
Okay, Mr. Gito.
I'm really happy that the SRA, or the CPC is willing to pay for the building and pay for the renovations of the building to put it in proper shape, to keep it in place. I guess there are a couple things that may be helpful to know. As Forrest, first of all, knows more about this building than probably anyone else in town, as you know. The Redevelopment Authority is more than happy to help the town in the ways that it can do it. We do not have staff. Let me underline that. We do not have staff. So there are things that need to be done by the town. The first thing that needs to be done, it seems to me, is to find out what you want to do with the building. As Mr. Anzavino indicated, we have a building on Pleasant Street, the Armory, that could be used for a number of different purposes by the Recreation Department, if they wanted to put in squash courts or paddleboard squash courts or anything else, and use the building. It sat there for 9 years. It's in horrible disrepair. We have to have a plan. I don't see one. One would think, under most circumstances, when someone goes to present something to the town, to buy something, or to spend money, they have a plan. That's not in place. I wholeheartedly think that the train station is a very important and historic building. My wife was part of the group that helped to renovate that 20 years ago. We need to make sure that we're going to be able to do something good with the building. What is the thing that we're going to be able to do differently than the MBTA just selling the building? If the MBTA sells the building, there will have to be the same kind of historical preservation pieces maintained for the outside of the structure. They can't violate that. It's just part of the law. If we want to have certain uses for the building, the town deals with that through zoning. I mentioned that early on in the year when the chairman of the Board of Selectmen came to the Redevelopment Authority. I want to see this building preserved. I want to see it used. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity that we don't have to spend a cent of taxpayers' money for this, because the CPC is going to do that. But I would expect that the town would have the foresight to have some plans in place for the building, would be able to put forward an article at town meeting in the springtime for what they wanted to do with the building, and that the town would pony up the resources, the professional resources within the town, the facilities manager that is in the town, and the ability for the town manager to appoint a committee to oversee construction renovation of buildings. That's not something that that the Redevelopment Authority should have to do. We have a certain amount of money, there's no question about that. But there are a lot of things that need to be done, and there is a lot more coordination that needs to occur. So I hope that all of those things happen, And I thank you.
Okay, this is the last one. Mr. Peter. The last name on my list before I closed it off.
All right, I'm going to cut to the chase here. This building is historic. It should be bought as a historic building and leave it at that, because I'm hearing all these crazy ideas out here. They're going to have a coffee shop. We had a coffee shop in there, and we had Dunkin' Donuts the other end. They both failed. They couldn't make it. We got to have a place for people to get out of the rain and the snow. What law is that written that we have to supply them a dry area to wait for the train? Because I ride Commonwealth Ave a lot. Summer and winter, snow, rain, people out there waiting for the trolley to go by in the rain, in the snow. No roof, no covers. Now we're talking about restoring restrooms and everything else in there. If you get a restaurant in there, 9 out of 10 times, them restrooms are going to be in the wrong place. They're going to have to take them out and rearrange the whole thing, because the kitchen might end up where the restrooms are. So it's crazy to go ahead and spend all this money when you don't know who's going in there and how they're going to lay things out. Well, I guess that's all I want to say. I mean, if we're going to buy it as a historical place, then buy it as that. Never mind trying to come up with all these little gimmicks here to make it look attractive, because most of these things are never going to happen in that place. It might even be too small for a restaurant. I don't know. I guess that's it. Thank you.
Okay. We're done. Yay. Okay. No. Okay, we need to close the public hearing first.
And I move to close the public hearing.
Okay. All those in favor of closing the public hearing?
Aye.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I move that we adjourn until...
No, we have to talk about that. Okay, so it's really late right now. So I would like to not vote tonight, and I would like to have a meeting on Monday.
As I started, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn this evening and return on Monday at 7:30. That will give us time to digest all this information and come back to vote and take the minutes up on Monday.
Okay, is there some discussion?
I was going to say, should we approve the minutes first?
We can do it on Monday. It's late. Monday won't take as long. Okay?
Just do to the hour.
Yeah, I'll talk to Jamie. Okay, is that what we want? Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Okay, all opposed? All right, good. All right, now wait a minute, we can't leave yet. We have one more thing. All right? Did we adjourn? Oh, we adjourned. Never mind. His motion was to adjourn. Okay, good. No, I was thinking we...